remain over-policed and underserved. Because you see, we stand with you because our fights and our demands are shared. So to that wannabe dictator in the White House, for a moment, hear us loud and clear. You thought deploying thousands of military troops throughout D.C. would silence our freedom of speech and make us back down. To that we say, hell no! Hell no! Hell no! Here we stand. We will not be quiet, not now, not ever. You know, we weren't surprised by the Supreme Court ruling, Jane is right, that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote in her dissent is the now completed demolition of the Voting Rights Act. Devastated? Yes. Surprised? No. Because it's always been true. When we build a movement of working class people demonstrating their power, the rich and the powerful try to exert their will wherever and whenever they can. That's why we're here. Joining millions across this country, coming together in all of our beautiful diversity. Organized to fight and determined to win. We demand, say we demand, fully funded schools. We demand affordable housing. We demand fair tax systems. And you know what else we're demanding? We're demanding a minimum wage of $25 per hour. Thank you, living wage for all. We will use our power to demand people over profits. Yeah, we will demand freedom for our students. We will demand freedom for our educators. We will demand freedom for all people who call America home. So we march today, we organize tomorrow, we vote in November. And the Supreme Court, they ain't stopping us. That man, he ain't stopping us. Because our power doesn't come from them. Our power comes from workers uniting and fighting and winning together. We the people will be that light finding a way toward liberation. We the people will be that light demanding justice. We the people will stand in our power, we will shine our light, and we will find a way to win all. That's it. We're gonna win all the things, all the things, all the things. Let's go win.
And we are not going anywhere.
All right. Across generations of working class, Black, brown, and immigrant, indigenous communities have brought this country while being denied, have built this country while being denied the full promise. Is that right? Yes. We built the country.
Like to get paid.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And we're going to talk about a breaking story that happened while I was in DC this week. It was completely unexpected. I was like sitting in the press room, and then I heard rumor that there's going to be this DOJ press conference with the FBI Director Kash Patel and the acting DOJ. It was news that I was welcome to hear. It was about the Southern Poverty Law Center. The breaking news that the Southern Poverty Law Center faces a major scandal after the grand jury came back with an indictment of 11 counts. And I'm going to go through all of that, but first I want to say welcome to my guest, Meg Brock. Meg, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Federal grand jury in Montgomery, Alabama, indicted the SPLC on 11 accounts. These charges include wire fraud, bank fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. The SPLC created a fiction, they funded it, they built an illusion, one that eager, willing politicians and members of the mainstream media embraced because it affirmed their own prejudices, unwilling to accept that the ideas that they had been championing, isolating kids during COVID, forcing masks, dehumanizing children, teaching K through 12 education through the lens of critical race theory and gender ideology, and perpetuating this narrative that America is this horribly racist country, deeply rooted in white supremacy. In fact, I think as it turns out, they couldn't find instances of institutional white supremacy, so they had to invent them with these false flag operations. We've been saying this for years, Meg. Finally, there's proof. So I'm glad to hear it, but I want to see justice. What are your thoughts about this indictment, considering your background? You could talk a little bit about that. You're from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and you certainly received a lot of backlash from groups like SPLC and what their rhetoric does to incite, I think, violence towards moms like us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I've been thinking a lot since this came out about the Moms for Liberty Summit that happened in Philadelphia in June 2023. And that was just, I think it was almost exactly 3 weeks after the SPLC had labeled Moms for Liberty an alleged hate group. But I mean, if you go back and read their report, it really was an attack on all parental rights, the whole parental rights movement. So really any parent like you and I who were at school board meetings, questioning COVID mitigation, calling for schools to reopen, saying we don't want children to learn at school that Johnny can become Jane, just things that are very basic. And I'll say too, with the COVID, we were right. I mean, all the evidence shows that the prolonged school closures, the masks have had a serious implications, very negative implications for students during that time. That are we're never going to really fully know the harms that were done, but that was an attack on all of us. I mean, I think going back to thinking that we were called domestic terrorists, and then this was kind of like the next step. So yeah, there was so much hate, so much that it's hard to even believe it was real in America, simply for being a parent who spoke up for your convictions during school board meetings.
So I've been going through my notes, my social media, all of my pictures, and it's been a trip down memory lane. I think I forgot, or I wanted to forget, these kind of dark times. Mm-hmm. So going back to the spring of 2023, I found an old video where Representative Ilhan Omar called Moms for Liberty, moms for bigotry, and moms for oppression, and used all sorts of language. And she also referenced basically the whole parental rights movement. And in a hearing with Secretary Cardona, the former Secretary of Education under Biden, she basically asked him, what are you doing to stop these parents? What are you doing to limit their influence? How are you using the force of federal government to come down hard on these white supremacists? She said that in May of 2023. Less than a month later, the SPLC put Moms for Liberty on its hate map, designated us as a domestic terrorist organization, an anti-government group alongside Antifa, the KKK, very radical extreme groups. We are just moms that went to school board meetings. We gave some fiery speeches, but there was no violence. There was no violent rhetoric. It was just moms trying to get involved, and successfully so, and getting involved in school board races and winning. I don't think it's a coincidence that day on Capitol in May, that moms were under fire, and that representatives like the squad were basically signaling to the federal government, what are you going to do to stop them? And then what do you know? We are designated as a domestic terrorist organization, which in my opinion opens the door for the federal government to start to surveil us and watch us. And it gives permission for so many radicals and frankly not mentally well people to feel it's their duty to take us out, to oppose us. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think back to, again, like thinking about the event that at the Moms for Liberty Summit at the Museum of the American Revolution, and how there was weeks of protests. There were a whole coalition of Pennsylvania state senators trying to get the event canceled, which is so ironic given that this was in Philadelphia, like literally the birthplace of liberty, democracy, freedom. You had politicians trying to get a group of moms canceled. And part of their reason was they said, oh, the SPLC has labeled them a hate group. They're, these extremists, and they were pressuring the museum to not have the event. And so I remember there was just a mob of people. We all had to have essentially a police escort to even enter the event. And you think about how crazy it is that a group of parents, mostly moms, very normal everyday moms, had to have a police escort to basically enter a cocktail hour. When you think about the implications of that, and I think about some of the horrible political violence we've seen escalating around the country in the past 18 months. I mean, I think back to that, I think we're very, very lucky that no one got hurt. I know there were arrests. I know there was a lot of harassment. I know that there were some kind of scary, even you have a video of when we were going out to dinner and your Uber is like getting like surrounded by like angry protesters. I mean, there was some tense moments that really, man, it's really crazy to think that in America, you could be demonized like that for simply sharing your beliefs that really are not radical at all. So
when I think about when we arrived Philadelphia, we had to have a meeting. We were told to not leave the hotel, that basically it wasn't safe and the police could not protect us beyond the minute we left the perimeter of the hotel. We were on our own. They told us to not wear any gear signifying that we were with Moms for Liberty. Don't wear even American flags. Don't wear anything that was patriotic. It was shocking that you needed to not look like you were a supporter of Trump or Moms for Liberty, or you loved America, that you had to be inconspicuous. But finally, one night, because Pennsylvania is your hometown, you wanted to show us around a little bit, take us out to eat. We thought, okay, let's get some Ubers and let's go to a restaurant. Maybe we could sneak out the back door. Unfortunately, they discovered us and they swarmed us. And it was one of the most uncomfortable situations I've ever been in. The way that they surrounded us as we walked to the Uber, the way they surrounded the Uber, they were trying to stop it from moving. They were just screaming and yelling and saying such hateful things, horrible things. They trying to provoke us, trying to get us to even just to touch them, I think, because that could provoke some kind of action. And it was very shocking for me, very shaken up by it, and we weren't the only group. There were other groups where if they simply just wanted to just go see Philadelphia, this historic city, leave their hotel, that they had surrounded all of the different exits, and they were watching and monitoring and coming after us. And I believe that was directly because SPLC put this target on our back and gave permission for these radicals to basically just make our lives miserable, to try to push us so far that we just want to walk away. We just want to be done. The pain is too much. What do you think the purpose is of the kind of tactics that they use, these more revolutionary tactics?
Well, I mean, I think that parents being involved in school boards and local politics is effective. I mean, I think about what just happened in Virginia, and you think in 2021, the Republicans won the gubernatorial race, and that was a lot of that was credited in part to parents, because it was kind of the peak of the COVID era, and all these moms and dads were totally pissed off that their kids were either not in school or still having to wear a mask, and they'd had enough, and so they really gathered around more local and state elections, and it had a huge impact. I saw that in my own county in 2021, when parents we had 13 different school districts in Bucks County, and in every district there were these grassroots groups that were mostly totally separate from the GOP, just parents who were upset. Yes. They were Republicans, Democrats, and libertarians, like all working together to try and elect school board members who would stop all the COVID craziness. And ultimately what that did is it had an impact, and it drove up the countywide totals to where the Republicans won all the county elections that they had lost 2 years earlier. And so when activists and progressive activists saw how impactful that was, and frankly, I think it's the most American thing ever. First, I mean, America really needs people to care. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't really care or care enough to even vote unless something is really pressing into them personally. But I think there was every reason for progressives to want to stamp out that fire, because it was effective and it was growing and it was really changing, and it continues to influence. But I think we really saw it really changing how politics were working.
I think you said something really important, because I think back to that time that this was not political. This wasn't Republican or Democrat. You weren't kind of doing a litmus test. When parents got together, they just came together as parents, as concerned citizens. We didn't say, hey, raise your hand if you're Republican, if you're not, get out of here, or vice versa. And this movement it just caught fire because it wasn't labeled. Mm-hmm. It was just, we were all in this collective moment together, and it was so successful. The school board races winning, I know in my own area, candidates were like beating out school board presidents, like 2 to 1. It was just such Glenn Youngkin was swept in during this time, and he was not predicted to win. And then, of course, the famous statement was made in one of the gubernatorial debates, and boom, Glenn Youngkin had his moment. And there were articles called "The Parent Revolution," and I think the success there that really scared the left and it scared the authoritarians, and so they needed to come in and break apart the unity. And what better way to do it than to have groups like SPLC label, say, hey, you don't want to be with those people. Those are white supremacists over there.
Right.
And by putting these labels on, that gave permission for the media to run with it. And boy, they sure did.
Yeah, and I think it's a very dehumanizing label. And I think I mentioned earlier, I was just reading that report, that they really took care to make sure they include the entire parental rights movement. Like they were speaking about Moms for Liberty, but they were speaking broadly about parents that were involved in school board meetings and weren't progressive. And I think that we both saw at the local level the kind of hate that spurred, and it's really disturbing. I mean, I think about school board candidates school board directors who were, mocked incessantly. Some received death threats. I mean, just absolutely horrible things. And it's so sad because particularly with school boards, they are supposed to be about education and not about politics. And so I really think that pushing this perception of extremism when you're having we know, like, for example, the transgender issue is an 80-20 issue. Like, if you believe that 5-year-olds should be learning that they can change their sex, like, you're the person who's actually extreme. And yet the SPLC labeled parents like you and I who have said, no, we should not be teaching this dangerous ideology to children, that we were extreme and hateful bigots, fascists for doing that, when really the numbers tell the story. So I think you're absolutely right. It allowed a dehumanizing narrative to really attack any parent who was speaking up on issues that most Americans actually do agree on.
It's to this day sometimes, but back then in particular, I felt like I was in the upside down. And my husband, like, having to relive some of this, my husband's like, I just can't even go there, because to pick up the local news, like the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in my area, and see articles written about your wife, your mom, your sister, your aunt, her face, and here's Scarlett Johnson running for school board. Oh, and by the way, she's a white supremacist. She's a bigot. She's a racist, transphobe. Linked to an organization that has been labeled by SPLC a domestic terrorist organization. That, what I just said there, that was the tagline by every legacy media source for the last 3 years. By far the qualifier. And it angered me every time, because I'm like, look around. Do you need, when you come to talk to members of Moms for Liberty, when you come to an event, do you need security? If it was just us, no. Like, we aren't violent. We do not speak violent rhetoric. Believe me, if we did, you'd know it. But on the other side, it's right there for you to see. Every event surrounded. I mean, there was one event in Wauwatosa school board meeting where me and 5 other moms and a grandfather came to speak at the school board meeting to support the vast majority of parents that were opposing comprehensive sexuality education in their schools. And we won't go down that route we have before, but it's just a vile curriculum that has nothing to do with education and everything about indoctrinating and sexualizing very young kids. So in this community, which was a blue community, the overwhelming number of voters opposed this. They didn't want it. The district put out one of their little polls. They did not get the numbers they wanted, so they did it again. And they basically had to keep editing out the poll till they got a number that was presentable. because the public didn't want what they were serving. And we were surrounded by 300 activists that wanted to grab me by the neck. We had to have a police escort into the school board meeting where these activists blocked our entry. And when we asked the police, could you please remove them? They said no. So this was our life. This was our life for years until President Trump was elected. This is just what we went through. And yet we were called the extremists. And it's just the upside down that narrative was allowed to persist. And to this day, there's not been a reckoning. There needs to be a reckoning. I was happy to see the CBS News accurately portraying what is happening and the gravity of the indictment against SPLC. But frankly, it's crickets everywhere else. Or they say SPLC was indicted for paying off informants, just like the FBI pays off informants. It's like, no, these things are the same. So you're in the media, you work for the Daily Wire. Now, of course, these are good guys. But why? Why is the media perpetuating this fiction? Why are they allowing these very radical people to intimidate us and even them?
Well, I think we know that most of the majority of legacy media is captured and has a huge bias to the left. I mean, you talked about local journalism. I mean, I remember that being a big thing for me as well, of having these local newspapers constantly smearing you or covering all of these stories in a very one-sided way. So, I mean, I don't really think it's that surprising. I think that's probably what we would expect at this point. But I think narrative is a really powerful tool that people use. And I think the average person isn't necessarily paying attention to all these issues, might not even know what the SPLC is, but they've probably heard that Moms for Liberty is a hate group, right? They've probably heard that. And so I think it is really important to kind of keep peeling the curtain back and really showing where these ideas come from and giving people an alternative perspective that maybe they're not getting from traditional legacy sources.
You're an investigative journalist. Just looking at these initial grand jury indictments, do you think that there's more? Do you think where there's smoke, there's fire? Do you think the SPLC acted alone? It's the only organization doing this sort of thing. Do you think that there are some politicians that were aware of perhaps what they were doing? Do you think that there's going to be more investigation, that we're going to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in the legal field, so I don't really know in terms of what will happen, but I do think with human nature, I mean, we know that people, politics, power, it's all corrupts people, and there's a lot of corruption. So I think that I'm sure as this investigation continues, we're going to learn a lot more, and I hope we learn more. I hope we really are able to get full transparency and to see what happened, who, what, where, whens, so we can be more informed as the public and have a reckoning of how these lies and these actions damage real people. I think that's the part that normally is really missing in a lot of this, is that you think of how it really damaged and caused real harm to so many parents on the ground who don't have the money to hire a security team, right? Like, you're talking about walking into a school board meeting full of angry people that hate you and would love to see you harmed. I mean, essentially, it's a scary feeling. It's very unsettling. And I think it takes a lot of courage to continue just making sure you use your right as an American to share your opinion, to share your voice, to engage with your community. But yeah, I think that there's probably so many stories of people who've been really harmed throughout the country by these labels.
So I'm very excited to read your article when it comes out. Before we go, I did want to talk about the article that you have that's just been released. It's The Quiet Suburban Shift, Turning Safe Communities into Radical Ground. And I think that article, that article tells you how we got here. Because how did we get to 2020, 2021, 22, 23, you go back in time just a little bit and you lay the groundwork. How did we get here? how did common sense lose in the suburbs? How did the suburban schools even get affected by what was happening in city schools? Can you tell us a little bit about your article and why you felt compelled to write it?
Yeah, so I'm from Bucks County, which is right outside of Philadelphia, and Bucks County's been in national news a lot over the past 2 years. But most recently, it was because the two teens who are charged with the ISIS-inspired or attempted terrorist attack in New York City were both from Bucks County. They were both one was from about half a mile away from where my husband and I bought our first house. The other one was 10 minutes away from where I grew up. So this hit really close to home for me. And I saw living there this real transformation in the suburbs that happened over the past decade. And so I went back and did some digging into the numbers. There were as many as 60,000 people a year leaving Philadelphia in the 2010s. Research suggested that a lot of them were parents, and they were leaving because of the failing schools. We know how the blue cities across the country, their schools are just abysmal. I mean, it's it's embarrassing. Like, of course, any parent who could not put their kids in those schools is going to want to take that chance. And then you have the crime issue where, I mean, I was reading through this Pew report, and it was just talking about people were like, yeah, I don't really want to worry about someone getting shot down my street when I have kids. And you're like, yeah, of course you don't. But I think what happened is people might have felt the effects of long-term progressive policies and how they failed to keep their community strong and safe. However, not everyone can recognize that if you continue to vote for the same things, then you're just going to have the same problems in your new home. And I think that's really what happened was a lot of people were fleeing the cities. The cities' populations have been kept up or slowly increased because of illegal immigration. I mean, there was a piece that was recently written that was expressing concerns that Philadelphia is not going to have like enough of a population growth or enough workers because of Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. And I mean, these are things people are saying out loud. So you think so the cities are just kind of been conquered territory for progressive Democrats. They won. And now you have voters shifting out to the suburbs with progressive voting beliefs. And then you have, I know, in Bucks, I mean, a lot of the Philadelphia Democrats were coming out to the suburbs to campaign or to raise money for suburban political candidates. And so I really see it as like the Democrats just trying to strategically enlarge their territory. And then you see how that can have implications even at the federal level. And I, in my piece, talked about how our county commissioners in Bucks County, the Democrats won in the end of 2019 for the first time in over 40 years. It took control of the county by 664 votes, which there were over 450,000 voters in the election. So that is a slimmest of margins. And in 2024, they actually voted to violate established election law in Pennsylvania, and it was a huge news story. If you remember back to November 2024, the Pennsylvania commissioners, those are my people. Those are my commissioners who sued me 5 times. Were viral for like 2 weeks. And so that is just an example of, like, you think about, I think a lot of times the conservative movement kind of leaves local people who are fighting these wars, like you're saying, as school boards, behind. But I think it's a real miscalculation, because you lose those elections. Well, you lose like the people who are running elections. You lose schools, which means like you lose what's being pumped into the minds of the future. You know, I mean, the local elections can have so many consequences that people don't really think about. So yeah, it was definitely a trip down memory lane for me to write that down my personal trauma.
I have so many thoughts with what you said. First of all, lots of times conservatives, Republicans talk about ROI, return on investment. The return on investment when you invest into local elections is high. Mm-hmm. If you put some money, talent, and effort into these local elections, if you find good candidates and then support them and help them, give them the resources, training they need, but also provide them with enough funds and campaign staff to actually run a good campaign. And they're getting more and more expensive. But back before COVID, I mean, a very small amount of money would go a long way. The Democrats, and I have, since reading your article, I have actually done my own digging, and I started to find policy papers, scholarly journals, and books, things written by very smart strategists in the Democrat Party. They were written, in the Obama era, and kind of mapped out a plan. That plan was to invest in local suburban elections. That by doing so, this was uncharted territory. Republicans tended to have control over these areas because they were the voters that always showed up. They're educated, they're in suburban areas, they show up rain or shine, they vote on election day. Democrats had voters that there's been a little bit of a switch. They have the voters that show up for big things, not a lot of small things. So they had a strategy, and they invested. They built a machine. We run campaigns. They think way farther ahead than that. They build machinery, and they really infiltrated institutions. We are trying to catch up, but unfortunately, it's still a blind spot for us. We do not invest in local elections. We don't invest enough in state elections. And when we have power, we don't use it. We do not use it the way that the Democrats have now. I'm not saying that we should do the illegal and underhanded tactics that they have done, but we should be looking to Ron DeSantis as an example of what you do when you have institutional power. You use it. You do not you don't let their name calling get to you. If you have Republicans that are kind of sold out, you primary them, and you keep this agenda going, and you keep building, and you really dig in and get this institutional power back, wrestle it back. We're still coming to grips with these concepts. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know how bad it's going to have to get before there is a come to Jesus moment in the conservative movement. But I sure hope it's coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting, like in 2019 in Bucks, the Democrats won, but then with the parental rights movement, which was totally grassroots, in 2021, the Republicans won. And then it shifted back in 2023 when it was just local elections, because I mean, I know my experience with the local GOPs are that they in the suburbs were a lot more social club and kind of aging boomer than they were really ready for the fight, and like you're saying, the strategy that was coming from the Democrats. And so Bucks lost in 2023, and then there was a whole influx of national attention in Pennsylvania in 2024. So Trump took Bucks in 2024, and then the Democrats swept the county again in 2025. So it just is, I don't know, Bucks is such a fascinating place. Like I was not engaged in politics before, or cultural issues before COVID. So I never really paid attention to it. But now I'm like, wow, I really lived through something like a place that's quite fascinating in terms of the swings and really what's happening across America. So I think they're definitely things worth thinking about and paying attention to.
Yeah, I think conservatives I think they're now coming out of this influencer moment where Trump won. It was a miracle. It was awesome, amazing. I cried. I was a surrogate for Trump. Amazing. And I think the fact that in new media that conservatives had this power for once was intoxicating. But I think now we have to govern, and we have to think about building. And I think there are many that just want to keep reliving the win of November 2024 and how great it was in the beginning of 2025. They just want to keep reliving that. and they need to wake up and smell the Marxism, because it's coming, it's here, and if we keep hiding out in an echo chamber, patting ourselves on the back, then we're missing the whole thing. We're missing what's really happening. And so and now we see influencer infighting and all of this garbage. So while I appreciate everyone watching this show, I think people need to watch a lot less, and they need to be engaging more, and they need to be touching grass and be out in their community and aware of what's happening in their community and still fighting for their community. That's how we won. We won because Trump's messaging and his campaign was brilliant, and it was ever present. He campaigned so harder than anyone harder than any politician I've seen in my lifetime. But you don't stop after that win. You have to keep going. You have to keep winning on ideas, and you can't get trapped in the echo chamber. And so I think that's my message. What is yours as we come to an end?
I mean, I've been researching the gender issue for the past 3 years, and I would just tell parents that to stay on guard. And why do things like school board elections matter so much? Well, I mean, I think the gender issue is a huge one, because I see the two main entry points for children into this psychosis being the internet and apps and schools. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people, when Trump won, and I think the Trump administration has taken really amazing steps to protect kids and children from gender ideology, but every single one is being fought in court, and there are a lot of activist judges who are not ruling in favor. And the other thing is that, a lot of the things that have happened are really only as good as this presidency. So until there's laws passed, that this could essentially all be erased as soon as if a new Democrat president was elected and wrote a whole different set of executive orders saying, actually, gender identity is real. And, if you misgender someone, it's a hate crime. You're going to go back on the SPLC's hate map. I mean, so I
going to be vindicated somehow with like radical far left. Yes, that's why.
I think that's why, in terms of what you're saying with real change and really, Mom's Liberty is all about schools. Why schools? I think they're so important. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm just talking about the issue of gender ideology. I mean, there's still so much to be done and to protect kids and families. So I think that the best way we can do that is just being engaged, being good moms, good wives, good friends, good aunts, sisters, members of our community, remembering like that's what real life is, and that's really where you find the joy in life. And I think if you don't have that joy, it's kind of hard to stay engaged with these issues. So I think, to your point, it's really important for people to find that balance in their lives.
Yes, we've got to stay engaged locally, stay vigilant, stay on top of your school board, find candidates, run for school board, collect the evidence when your school board or your state or a government institution is violating Title IX, violating federal law, violating civil rights by teaching or having a policy or a program that is steeped in critical race theory, meaning DEI, actually racist. So that's our job. We do that. And then we make sure we get this information to the federal government so that they can do their job, which is launch Title IX investigations, to withhold funding when schools are not in compliance. And exactly what happened on Tuesday, that is in the federal government's lane. They need to continue to go hard on the SPLC and dig up, all that they can, expose what they did, and anyone affiliated with them needs to be exposed as well, because this is our shot. This is our chance to try to root out some of this corruption, this virus, this cancer that has just taken hold of American institutions. So while there's many things the federal government can't do as far locally and school boards and what's happening with grassroots activists, this they can do. They can provide us justice for what happened to us, and they could protect us in the future from something like this ever happening again. And it is incumbent upon them to work very hard and very vigilantly to get justice for all of us who were harmed in this space, because ultimately it is our children that are harmed when we can't protect them. So I don't think I could end it any other way than that.
That's great. No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, and I can't wait to read your next article. I encourage everyone to follow Meg Brock. We'll have all of her information in the comments, and follow Daily Wire. They're doing great work. And
Thank you, Scarlett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Meg. Bye.
Bye.
No more! No more! The 3 million members of the NEA stand with immigrants and with every worker struggling to make ends meet, with Black and brown communities who remain over-policed and underserved. Because you see, we stand with you fights, and our demands are shared. So to that wannabe dictator in the White House, for a moment, hear us loud and clear. You thought deploying thousands of military troops throughout DC would silence our freedom of speech and make us back down. To that we say, hell no! Hell no! Hell no! Here we stand. We will not be quiet, not now, not ever. You know, we weren't surprised by the Supreme Court ruling, Jane is right, that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote in her dissent is the now completed demolition of the Voting Rights Act. Devastated? Yes. Surprised? No. Because it's always been true. When we build a movement of working class people demonstrating their power, the rich and the powerful try to exert their will wherever and whenever they can. That's why we're here. Joining millions across this country, coming together in all of our beautiful diversity. Organized to fight and determined to win. We demand, say we demand, fully funded schools. We demand affordable housing. We demand fair tax systems. And you know what else we're demanding? We're demanding a minimum wage of $25 per hour. Thank you, living wage for all. We will use our power to demand people over profits. Yeah, we will demand freedom for our students. We will demand freedom for our educators. We will demand freedom for all people who call America home. So we march today, we organize tomorrow, we vote in November. And the Supreme Court, they ain't stopping us. That man, he ain't stopping us. Because our power doesn't come from them. Our power comes from workers uniting and fighting and winning together. We the people will be that light finding a way toward liberation. We the people will be that light demanding justice. We the people will stand in our power we will shine our light, and we will find a way to win all the things. We're gonna win all the things, all the things, all the things. Let's go win.
Call to tax the rich, abolish ICE, and more. Can you believe this? They're closing down schools so they can go out and protest. In Madison, Wisconsin, public schools are closed today, with 70% of the teachers' unions saying that they are participating in May Day protests. Our next guest says that Madison schools have crossed the line. Wisconsin mom Scarlett Johnson joins us now. Scarlett, thank you so much. What is your reaction?
I'm in shock. Although maybe I shouldn't be, considering the history of the Madison Metropolitan School District, but they are turning schools into political staging grounds. And this is where they have crossed the line. They are not just indoctrinating the kids in the classroom. They are encouraging actively for students to leave the classroom and go march in the streets with teachers, with administrators. It's just shocking to me, the level that they're willing to take this to, their hatred for President Trump. And make no mistake about it, this entire rally, this May Day, Friday, May 1st, is all about, this is an anti-capitalist, anti-Trump movement, and they're using our kids as political pawns.
You know, Scarlett, I grew up in the South. If this had happened in South Carolina, residents, parents would have been up in arms. They never would have stood for this. They want their kids in school. They want the teachers teaching them math and science and not being out on the streets, skipping class to go protest and to be political. What's the reaction from the residents there?
The reaction from the residents is, I think, a lot of shock. It doesn't matter your political affiliation. You don't want your kids skipping out of school to go protest in the streets. And what's happening is that the teachers' unions, the Madison Teachers Union, made it impossible for parents to say no, because they forced the closure of every single school in that school district. When teachers' unions submitted this petition where they said, we're going to call in sick unless you just shut down the school for this day. So instead of kids preparing for AP testing and their ACTs and SATs and the end of the school year, instead of educating kids, they're giving kids toolkits, signs, and markers and saying, hey, let's go march in the streets against Trump. They're even having kids hold signs that say teachers should be paid more money. I mean, they're using kids as pawns, and residents are outraged and they're upset. They need to shut down daycares.
Scarlett, if you look at the report card in Wisconsin, it's not good. These kids need to be in class. The teachers need to be in class. Grade 4, only 42% are proficient in math. Only 37% are proficient in, 31% are proficient in reading. And then look at grade 8 down at the bottom of the screen. Only 37% in math and 31% in reading. Those numbers are not good.
These numbers are terrible. And every year, the Wisconsin Department of Instruction lowers the threshold. They lower the standards. And so they're even worse than what you see right there when you get apples to apples comparisons. So bottom line, the teachers' unions aren't educating our kids. They're not teaching them to read. And when they're not allowing boys in the girls' bathrooms, which they do in this school district, they've eliminated girls' bathrooms. There's only gender-inclusive bathrooms and boys' bathrooms. When they're not hiding gender identities from parents, they're inviting kids to join them to protest in the streets. It's gone too far. A line has been crossed. And you know what, Ainsley? The parents are making their opinion known with their feet, because every year this school district has declining enrollment numbers, and they're projected to lose 700 more students in the next few years. Gee, I wonder why.
You know, and they're pushing their agenda on our kids, clearly. They're telling them, you don't have to go to school today, go participate in this march. It might not even be something that these kids understand, know about. Their parents might be conservative and not agree with it. The teachers' unions are pouring more than $1 billion, Scarlett, to left-wing organizations and political groups. Can you believe that? $1 billion to these left-wing groups. They're trying to indoctrinate our children. Look at it when it's broken down with the National Teachers Union and the state and local. What's your reaction?
I'm not surprised at all because I've run for school board and I have helped numerous moms run for school board. And the number one opponent that we face are teachers unions. They have unlimited budgets. There's postcards that come into our state from all over the country. They're organized, they're well funded, and they have a massive attack campaign. We're just regular moms trying to make a difference. We're fighting against this huge woke Goliath. But you know what? Sometimes David wins. And I think they're overplaying their hand here. Parents are seeing just how corrupt and political these organizations are. And I hope that they're realizing they should side with the moms, and we need to revoke the NEA charter as well. They have a federal charter.
Scarlett, thank you so much for coming on with us this morning.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And I'm here with our friend, Corey DeAngelis, and we're going to talk about May Day. That was on May 1st, this past Friday. And we, leading up to May Day, Corey and I were posting, and we were on talk shows, and we were sending out the alarm to parents all over the country that radical teachers unions were using this socialist Marxist holiday as a way to stop education on Friday, close schools, and organize students to protest on the streets with them. Protesting just about everything. I was at a DC protest, and it was different in different states. But I wanted Corey to come back on. We talked about this a little bit last week, but I'm so glad that you could join me again, Corey, because I wanted to talk about what happened, what didn't happen, and why parents should still be concerned. So thank you for coming on again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scarlett.
So what did you see on this Friday? What did you see? What surprised you? And what didn't you see?
Yeah, unfortunately, we were right that they were going to use the kids for political props. And that's what they did. I mean, in Chicago, I had people on the ground sending me videos from the Freedom Foundation. And you had kids writing in chalk and misspelling words because kids can't read, write, or do math in Chicago, yet they had them out protesting in the streets. And they were even bragging on social media. The Chicago Teachers Union posted a video of a teacher saying that, well, they reorganized their school so that the kindergartners could go protest too. And they thought that was a good thing. They were bragging about this. And kindergartners have no idea what's going on. They have no business involving children at that age. I mean, even in high school either, but it's really indefensible for kindergartners to go to these political protests. And then a lot of people were surprised because a lot of news was bubbling up out of not just Chicago and deep blue cities, but also North Carolina. They don't even have collective bargaining in North Carolina, but they do have a teachers union there. It's called the North Carolina Association of Educators. It's the state affiliate of the NEA, which is the largest teachers union in the country. And they canceled school for so many kids. And guess what? In Scarlett, teachers' strikes are not even legal in North Carolina. but they did it anyway. They just call it, something else. It's a mass sick out. People were just calling out of work, and the school districts just had to close because they didn't have enough staff. Well, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. It seems like a strike to me. It's just under a different language so that they can try to skirt the law. But they were calling for so 700,000 kids were out of school that day. And there was actually a construction worker that I looked up on Facebook. He posted a comment on one of the news stories. Said, "Look, I had to call into work because my kids' school closed down last minute. I didn't know what to do." That tweet went pretty viral because a lot of people understand, like, there's a different set of rules for people who work in the private sector than the people who work in these government unions who have no accountability whatsoever. A lot of people were commenting as well, saying, like, why do this in the middle of the week? If you want to go have a political protest, why not do it on the weekend? And the response from a lot of these people was, well, it wouldn't hurt as much if we did it on the weekend. So their whole point was to hurt parents, was to make things uncomfortable, and so that the school district would cave to their wishes. The thing is, Scarlett, in the private sector, I don't really have a problem if you go on strike in the private sector, because if Walmart had a union, for example, and everybody called out of work on the same day, it would be inconvenient, but maybe you go shop at Safeway or Trader Joe's or somewhere else, and you get to keep your money. You don't have to give your funding to Walmart that's not even giving you any services. But with the school system, you have to call out of work because you're relying on the child care services. So you're losing out money there. You've already paid funding and property taxes to the school system. You don't get the service, and you can't vote with your feet and take your money somewhere else unless you have school choice. So this is great advertising for homeschooling and school choice, but it makes it really tough for parents who are in the sticky situation where you're going to have endless teacher strikes throughout history going forward as well, because there's no incentive. In the private sector, the employer feels a little bit of the pain. The employees feel pain too, because they risk losing their job. They risk could have earned that day. But in the school system, this is why we saw COVID school closures happen for such a long time. The customer gets screwed, and they don't get their money. They don't get the service. The public school teachers got to sit at home, continue getting paid. The school districts didn't care because the kids were still on the roll, because school choice wasn't a big thing before COVID. And so, I'd say this is free advertising for homeschooling, school choice. And the last thing I'll say on North Carolina was that there's a lot of pushback going on social media still to this day, especially with what happened in North Carolina. And they called for all of these demands. Some of them, we knew were coming. They wanted $20,000 per student. They wanted to increase spending tremendously. They wanted to increase wages for everybody by 25%. I don't know where they got that number, but just pulled it out of the hat, and it was across the board. It's not, they didn't say, oh, we should target it for bonuses for people doing a good job. Of course, they fight for the lowest common denominator in the union. They fight against merit pay. So just give us all more money, even if we're not showing up to work, even if we're not doing a good job and we're failing academically, if we're not interesting to the students, give us all a 25% raise. That kind of made sense. We knew that was coming. But they also called for redrawing the congressional maps. Like, that just came out of nowhere. It's like they wanted to rig the game in favor of the Democrats. That was part of their demands. And they had all of these other political demands in there as well that had nothing to do with education. So I think a lot of people are fed up with it, especially people who have to miss out on their own work and have to rearrange their own lives so that the teachers' unions can get what they want.
Well, according to the NEA, the WEA, AFT, even local, like North Carolina, in Seattle, different teachers' unions, affiliates, they put out on their social media that May Day Strong, that was sort of the banner of this whole movement, May Day Strong, was all about pushing America to the brink, this sort of stress test, this structure test. And they said, quote, their goal is to educate, agitate, and facilitate change. So educate us about basically their plight, their struggle, agitate, organize, and then facilitate this change. I was in DC for the May Day Strong, the various different marches and protests, which all culminated into a speech by Becky Pringle. So we did not see for 3 hours, actually more than 3 hours. They all met up by Washington Monument. I saw all different unions, so many different groups, and I'm going to post some footage about this later during the week and start to go through all the different groups and shirts that we saw.
And the Communist Party.
Communist Party, Socialist Party, official, different offshoots, and a lot of immigration, pro-immigration groups. And the signs there were not, I will say this, there were hardly any children. Every restaurant was open. Every business was open. They did march in the street, but you could see that this was all planned and coordinated, that they had already made the police aware. There was National Guard, there were police officers. So this, by no means did they do what I think they tried to accomplish. So I just want to say, like, business ran as usual. So in that way, they failed. But there was a very large crowd, and they were chanting things that, very socialist, very communist. But one thing of all the list of grievances that you mentioned, one that I heard that you didn't mention was a 4-day work week. They wanted housing, government housing, 4-day work week, insurance, all education,
all the goodies,
college, graduate school, basically. And they're like, we should only be working 30 hours a week. Why? We should have every Friday off. And everyone cheered.
We shouldn't have to work, and you should give us more money for not working. Yes. When we're failing academically with 80% of kids not proficient in math. Oh, that's such a splendid idea.
Yes, a great idea. And teachers, you should only be working 4 days a week. And Becky,
let's get even less education.
Her main topic was, look what just happened with the Supreme Court decision. And she said, we don't care what the Supreme Court says. Supreme Court can't stop us. The president can't stop us. Congress can't stop us. And she's like, ain't nobody can stop us. We're going to win all the things.
All the things. Her
all
favorite
the things. Yes. And they're cheering. And then they put their, out. If we had done something like that, the kinds of things that they would say.
Yeah,
but they
exactly.
did it, and they prayed to organize labor. I was there with my friend Bill Brewer, who's with Moms for Liberty. He kind of came to help me as a cameraman and for protection. And he's just laughing. He's like, Scarlett, is this what you have to put up with all the time? He's like, these people are crazy. He's like, do they understand what they're even saying? Like, our whole economy would collapse. This is just a joke, right? But then he looked around and saw all the blue NEA shirts, hundreds and hundreds of teachers, educators. They are cheering all of this on. And to me, that kind of said it all. They didn't go march in the march. My opinion, they didn't want to be seen with the communists and the kind of signs. They were so vulgar, the swearing, all of that. They knew that wouldn't be a good media look. So they all just waited at the end of this whole march and then put on the rally. And again, we'll hear more about it. But in Madison, Wisconsin, in my home state, like Chicago, the Madison Metropolitan School District, way ahead of time, a week ahead of time, said we're shutting down schools. So I think they put that out on Monday. As well. They did some of the things similar to Chicago. They bussed kids out. They were protesting by the Capitol. There were a lot of students there. There were a lot of young kids there, unlike in DC. And like North Carolina, Wisconsin it is illegal to hold a strike in this manner. Like, that violates the law.
Mm-hmm.
And in any state, a purely political strike is not legal. You cannot strike for pure political reasons. You're supposed to be advocating for something in a contract. And I looked this up and talked to some lawyers. So, but no one's going to do anything about it in these areas. But technically, that's the case. In North Carolina, that was the state where the most school districts had shut down, and it was quite a large. They had quite a large showing. But the organizers of this Sunrise Movement and of May Day Strong were located near outside of Raleigh and in Raleigh, Carolina. So I think that explains why they had 9 or 10 school districts that shut down.
I think it was at least 13 in North Carolina. Really? Crazy. Yeah, 700,000 kids. And of course they chose May Day. I mean, when they tell you who they really are, you should believe them. This is a communist holiday. And of course, the Communist Party USA was there. All the Democrat socialist groups were there as well. And, this didn't bubble up out of nowhere, Scarlett. We all saw the NEA convention last summer in Portland, Oregon. They passed a bunch of crazy resolutions, but one of them was to dedicate financial resources towards mobilizing students to protest against Trump's policies, including immigration enforcement. Hello. It didn't come out of nowhere. And so, yeah, it's just crazy to me how, of course, the kids wanted. Scarlett, you came back. Did you?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I just had to adjust something really fast.
Oh, I was like, I don't even know why I'm talking anymore. I think she fell off.
No.
But yeah, it's just crazy to me how they have been planning this for a long time. They called President Trump a fascist in one of their official resolutions. They misspelled the word fascism in that same one. But then they dedicated money towards helping students organize political protests. And then you fast forward to today, you see that they were bragging on social media about having kindergartners go out there and protest. And they even had curriculum. And I got a hold of this. I don't know why I'm still on their email list. They should take Corey DeAngelis off of that if they're smart, but I guess they're not very smart. And their curriculums, they were comparing abolishing slavery to abolishing police and abolishing prisons as if those things are equal, and basically trying to brainwash kids into thinking if you like the police, then that means you must like slavery. That just makes zero sense. If you like prisons and safety, that means you like slavery. No, those aren't the same thing. And they were comparing President Trump to fascist dictators and so on and so forth. And it's just pure political propaganda in the schools. And they're just basically like, what are you going to do about it? And they killed school choice in Illinois too in 2023, even for the low income kids. They had 9,000 kids on scholarships, mostly low income kids. And they got kicked out of scholarships because the teachers union fought against that. And they're trapping kids in these institutions that aren't aligned with their parents' values. And, maybe there's some conservatives left in the public school system in Chicago, and those teachers need to leave. They can go to optouttoday.com. And I just saw on the Teacher Freedom Alliance website, they have now 14,400 teachers who have left the unions in the past year and joined their alternative, which is free because donors are covering their liability insurance and so on and so forth, and professional development. And now you don't have to give your money to Stacey Davis Gates, the president there, who sends her own kid to a private school, called school choice racist. And they're basically not giving the money to great teachers. And so the best public school teachers, I think, are leaving the system and saying the heck with this. But you should leave the union at least, and not give your money to political causes like this that you disagree with.
And it's for many years, you have been sounding the alarm about teachers unions and how political they are. And just last week, there was a bombshell report put out by Defending Ed. What did that report say about where the money goes, the dues money?
Oh, yeah.
How much have they spent on political causes, and where is their money going?
Yeah, I believe that report found since 2015 that the unions, just the major ones, have spent over $1 billion on far left causes. And if you look just at Open Secrets, this is publicly available information, 98% of the NEA's political contributions go to Democrats every cycle. This is not a new thing either. This is a money laundering operation. Their president, Becky Pringle, is an at-large member of the Democrat National Committee. She makes $500,000 a year. Randy Weingarten of the AFT, they contributed 99.89% of their political contributions to Democrats in the last election cycle. It's a one-sided political entity. And Congress should revoke the NEA's federal charter that they've had for over 100 years now. I just tweeted at Speaker Mike Johnson today asking, why in the world has the House at least not passed?
I'm reposting that.
Why in the world? Like, you can give me every excuse in the book for why the Senate hasn't done it. And they have a better argument. Look, we'd have to nuke the filibuster. We don't have 60 votes. We only have 53 Republican votes in the Senate. Well, the House has a GOP majority. 98% of the political funding from the NEA goes to Democrats. Why in the world would the GOP not unanimously vote against the NEA having a federal charter? That is an easy vote. I mean, even if you're a Democrat, even if you're like a Democrat who supports Randy Weingarten's union, they don't have a federal charter, but the NEA does. They're the only union that has the special privilege. And so it's time to correct the record. The NEA has gone so far away from its original purpose. I'd even say, even to start, it wasn't really a purely educational organization. They've always had these kind of communist roots, but they've gotten so bad. And it's just in our face now that they're using our kids against us to go lobby with the Communist Party. And the kids think it's a field trip. The parents might think the same thing. And even if the parents think it's a bad idea, what are they going to do? They don't want to be like that construction worker who has to take off of work if they're barely making ends meet. And so low-income parents in particular, they have no recourse. So we need school choice. We need teacher choice. And Congress, you need to wake the freak up and stop giving this kind of false sense of authority to the NEA as if it's a educational entity when it's a political activist group for far left causes. The teachers unions are out of step with the teachers. And I've seen polling from Education Week and other places finding that at least a quarter of teachers identify as conservatives. So you look at their funding, 99% Democrat, but not 99% of teachers are conservatives. Are Democrats. There's a misalignment happening there. And so I think, one, teachers should opt out. They should be able to join the Teacher Freedom Alliance, get their liability insurance covered for free, which is actually twice the amount of what the Randy Weingarten's provides. Theirs at the Teacher Freedom Alliance is at about $2 million per person, whereas the unions is only about $1 million per person. And the unions is in the union's name, whereas the Teacher Freedom Alliance is in the actual teacher's name. So it's for the thing is with the unions, they can choose not to defend you, but if it's in your name, you're going to be covered. So yeah, I think the people like Randy Weingarten who are making so much more than the average teacher, they have zero accountability right now, and the only way to make them feel the fire is for the teachers to stop sending their money to them. And so the last thing I want to say on this is, in Chicago, things sometimes they get so bad to where, you fall off the cliff and you can start to climb back up. And I think we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. In Chicago, it's been an international embarrassment where they said it was racist to reopen schools. And then they were caught vacationing in Puerto Rico, during COVID. And so obviously they weren't worried about safety. They just wanted to hold children's education hostage. But now we have polling for the first time ever finding that Chicago Teachers Union has a net negative 26% favorability rating. Most Chicago voters, 52%, say that they don't support the Chicago Teachers Union. 26% say that they do. So that's almost twice the amount say that they are unsupportive of the union as opposed to being supportive of them. And that's a big flip where they used to have a favorable kind of mojo with the general public. And now their brand is becoming toxic so much that in the primaries a couple months ago, they endorsed 13 candidates and a majority of them lost. And so some of the Democrat politicians didn't even brag about their CTU endorsement. They didn't even put it on their campaign websites this time. And when things become so bad for the unions, I think that's when we start to have a glimmer of hope that things could actually change. This happened in Texas too, my home state. Every single election cycle, the Texas Federation of Teachers, which is the Randy Weingarten affiliate, used to endorse the Republicans who voted against school choice. But then when we started to call it out, and we had social media putting a spotlight on this, and COVID, waking up the parents and the conservatives saying, you know what, I don't think Republicans should be involved with these far left activist groups called the teachers unions. And starting in 2022, the unions out here in Texas no longer endorsed Republicans. You might say, oh, that's bad news for Republicans, but the Republicans didn't need them. Mm-hmm. And that's bad news, I'd say, for the teachers unions, that their political sway is no longer seen as a benefit for at least one of the two major political parties. And in some places like Chicago, they're even becoming not just toxic for Republicans, but for Democrats too. So I think the way forward here is that the more that the Democrats say, you know what, this isn't good for me either, and that's because parents are holding them accountable at the ballot box, the unions will lose their influence. They'll lose their power. And that'll be amplified by teachers leaving the unions. And they'll have to pivot. They'll have to stop getting so involved in political games that maybe they'll focus on their members. One last statistic I'll give you, Scarlett, is that according to the LM2 reports, publicly available information from the nation's largest teachers union, the NEA, less than 10% of their funding, which is over $430 million a year in total funding, less than 10% of that actually goes towards representing teachers. So teachers, wake up. Parents are starting to wake up. Some politicians are actually waking up. The teachers are the last line of defense for Randy Weingarten. And I think if they start to see that Randy's not on their side, the teachers unions will implode. That's how you starve the beast.
Yeah, I noticed that as far as Chicago, that local reporters were giving tough questions to representatives of the Chicago Teachers Union when asking them about these school closures and talking to them about education. I was actually surprised to see that they were pushing back and they were actually challenging some of the answers. It was great to see, and quite surprised that they weren't buying what the representatives were selling on TV. And I also wanted to point out something that you posted on Friday about Chicago's teachers unions, that they spend $30,000 per child and not a single child is reading at a proficient level, a grade proficient level in Chicago public schools. $30,000. That is the price tag of an elite private school. Yep. That's the price tag of many colleges. And they can't even teach the kids to read at grade level. It's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, you think that's bad. They have that Douglas Academy spends over $90,000 a year, the one that's almost empty, and they have not a single kid proficient in math or reading. And you're right, some of the even mainstream media is pushing back on the CTU. Stacey Davis Gates, I just posted a video. She was trying to say they weren't political, and he called her out, the journalist, and said, 80% of your money goes towards political activities. What do you mean you're not political? And she was like, oh, she didn't think that was going to be any pushback. And so she pivoted and said, well, we're political for good reasons, because we want to make sure Black women have a job and that they can earn a wage so much that they don't have to have a husband. And I'm just over here like, why are you encouraging your members to not have a family and to not have a husband? You should be interdependent on each other. That's how families work, right? It's a mutual relationship. And it's just crazy. They're going to war on educational outcomes, but they're also going to war on the nuclear family. And CNN, of all places, pushed back on Stacey Davis Gates a couple of years ago when we found out that she called school choice racist and sends her own kid to a private school. Even the CNN host grilled her for like 8 minutes straight. I mean, wow. Stacey probably thought this was going to be a softball interview. CNN sucks in so many ways. But in this interview, it was just too good to be true. They were just hounding her on this. I think it was Abby Phillips was the name of the reporter, was just like, wouldn't let her go on the issue. And Stacey Davis Gates, you could tell she just wanted to hop out of her seat and end the interview, but she held on for dear life. And if you look at where teachers in Chicago send their kids, I think they're about 3 to 4 times as likely to send their own children to private schools, about 30 to 40%, whereas the national average is like 10%. And that just goes to show you they know the failures of the system that they're operating. They know it's not safe. And yeah, teachers don't have autonomy in the current system. They don't feel like they can have any discipline. And so they're going into a war zone. It's not safe for the kids. It's not safe for the teachers. And if the cook is not eating at the restaurant, maybe they know something that we don't know, and we shouldn't eat there either. So this is a good reason why other parents should have choices in education too, not just the teachers union president.
That was a great conversation with Corey. I'm so glad that he could come on and discuss what happened on Friday, May 1st. What we're seeing now should remove any remaining doubt about what these teachers unions are really doing. The NEA is not just quietly nodding at May Day and the activities that took place in several states across this country, activities which led over 700,000 school kids out of the classroom, and parents were left to wonder, why is this happening? I can tell you why. It's because the classrooms are viewed as political playgrounds for radical activists, and this bad behavior is being allowed to continue by Democrats and at the local level, and it has to stop. It just has to stop, and we have to put the pressure on to expose these teachers unions and what they're doing and make this stop. It's not right. It's not okay to put out official toolkits that tell members who are educators, members who are administrators, members who are counselors in public schools, telling them to educate, agitate, organize, and facilitate political change by using the students as props in their radical leftist movement is wrong, and it's unconscionable. There are many educational associations at the local level in Raleigh, North Carolina, in Madison, Wisconsin, in Chicago, that promoted political training to help these protests, to help these activities, to give students signs and ideas for signs, to hold markers, to give them the tools that they would need to engage in this kind of political theater. They did this in order to, quote, build power. Think about that. Build power. That language says everything that you need to know about teachers' unions. They didn't say we want to agitate, infiltrate, and organize to increase reading scores, or to increase math scores, or to better educate children, or to protect teachers and keep them safe in their classrooms. No, they did it to build political power. And what would they use with that political power? They want open borders. They want to engage in anti-ICE activities. They want to toss out some Supreme Court justices, or they want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to win political elections. They want to disrupt the President Trump's presidency. They want to redraw legislative maps so that they can win more seats at the state and federal level. This is what they want to do with the power. And once they have that power, if they were to be successful, well, then they say that's part of the revolution where they will win all the things, all the things. And when they win all the things, that's when they're going to have this new government, this new era in democracy. I tell you what, this is not about democracy. It's about authoritarianism, and it's about creating a government system which would oppress anyone who disagrees with their radical left-wing dogma. Wake up and smell the Marxism. Again, these teachers' unions are not about increasing the reading proficiency of K through 12 students. They're not about increasing math proficiency. They're not about adding more STEM classes and more AP classes in high schools. They are about building political power. They aren't about restoring discipline. They aren't about raising achievements. They're about raising kids to be political pawns in their woke army. Believe them when they tell you who they are. Becky Pringle appeared in a Sunrise event. It was called Roadmap to a Political Revolution. This was the precursor for this May Day protest. And this roadmap was used in Minnesota in the anti-ICE protests. She encouraged parents and teachers to engage in political activity. She encouraged students to engage in political activity, to take to the streets, to protest the Trump administration, to fight for open borders, to fight for all sorts of far-left political causes. When they tell you who they are, believe them. And you heard Corey when he told you that the NEA has a 100-year-old federal charter. It is time to revoke the NEA charter. Becky Pringle is the president of the NEA, the National Education Association. And as you heard from me and from Corey, and you will hear directly from Becky Pringle, because I'm going to play her speech from May Day, Friday, May 1st in Washington, D.C., you're going to hear a political operative who has no interest in educating children to read in science and math. She only sees your children as soldiers in her woke army, and she wants to use them to gain political power and to help friends and allies gain political power. This should horrify you. It horrifies me. It's time to stand up, speak out, and fight back. Thank you very much.
Protesters call to tax the rich, abolish ICE, and more. Can you believe this? They're closing down schools so they can go out and protest. In Madison, Wisconsin, public schools are closed today, with 70% of the teachers' unions saying that they are participating in May Day protests. Our next guest says that Madison schools have crossed the line. Wisconsin mom Scarlett Johnson joins us now. Scarlett, thank you so much. What is your reaction?
I'm in shock. Although maybe I shouldn't be, considering the history of the Madison Metropolitan School District, but they are turning schools into political staging grounds, and this is where they have crossed the line. They are not just indoctrinating the kids in the classroom, they are encouraging actively for students to leave the classroom and go march in the streets with teachers, with administrators. It's just shocking to me, the level that they're willing to take this to, their hatred for President Trump. And make no mistake about it, this entire rally, this May Day, Friday, May 1st, is all about, this is an anti-capitalist, anti-Trump movement, and they're using our kids as political pawns.
You know, Scarlett, I grew up school. They want the teachers teaching them math, science, not being out on the streets, skipping class to go protest and to be political. What's the reaction from the residents there?
The reaction from the residents is, I think, a lot of shock. It doesn't matter your political affiliation. You don't want your kids skipping out of school to go protest in the streets. And what's happening is that the teachers' unions, the Madison Teachers Union, made it impossible for parents to say no because they forced the closure of every single school in that school district. When teachers' unions submitted this petition where they said, we're going to call in sick unless you just shut down the school for this day. So instead of kids preparing for AP testing and their ACTs and SATs and the end of the school year, instead of educating kids, they're giving kids toolkits, signs, and markers and saying, hey, let's go march in the streets against Trump. They're even having kids hold signs that say teachers should be paid more money. I mean, they're using kids as pawns, and residents are outraged and they're upset. They shut down daycares.
Scarlett, if you look at the report card in Wisconsin, it's not good. These kids need to be in class. The teachers need to be in class. Grade 4, only 42% are proficient in math. Only 37% are proficient in 31% are proficient in reading. And then look at grade 8 down at the bottom of the screen. Only 37% in math and 31% in reading. Those numbers are not good.
These numbers are terrible. And every year, the Wisconsin Department of Instruction lowers the threshold. They lower the standards. And so they're even worse than what you see right there when you get apples to apples comparisons. So bottom line, the teachers' unions aren't educating our kids. They're not teaching them to read. And when they're not allowing boys in the girls' bathrooms, which they do in this school district, they've eliminated girls' bathrooms. There's only gender-inclusive bathrooms and boys' bathrooms. When they're not hiding gender identities from parents, they're inviting kids to join them to protest in the streets. It's gone too far. A line has been crossed. And you know what, Ainsley? The parents are making their opinion known with their feet because every year this school district has declining enrollment numbers, and they're projected to lose 700 more students in the next few years. Gee, I wonder why.
You know, and they're pushing their agenda on our kids, clearly. They're telling them, you don't have to go to school today, go participate in this march. It might not even be something that these kids understand, know about. Their parents might be conservative and not agree with it. The teachers' unions are pouring more than $1 billion, Scarlett, to left-wing organizations and political groups. Can you believe that? $1 billion to these left-wing groups. They're trying to indoctrinate our children. Look at it when it's broken down with the National Teachers Union and the state and local. What's your reaction?
I'm not surprised at all because I've run for school board and I have helped numerous moms run for school board. And the number one opponent that we face are teachers unions. They have unlimited budgets. There's postcards that come into our state from all over the country. They're organized, they're well funded, and they have a massive attack campaign. We're just regular moms trying to make a difference. We're fighting against this huge woke Goliath. But you know what? Sometimes David wins. And I think they're overplaying their hand here. Parents are seeing just how corrupt and political these organizations are. And I hope that they're realizing they should side with the moms, and we need to revoke the NEA charter as well. They have a federal charter.
Scarlett, thank you so much for coming on with us this morning.
Madison Metropolitan School District has crossed a line. Activist teachers, administrators, and political activists successfully shut down the school district. They have asked students to join them as they protest in the streets against President Trump, against ICE, against capitalism, against America. It's a no work, no school, no business, no shopping, national strike, pushed by far-left radical unions, led by teachers unions like the NEA. The NEA, with 3 million members, is the largest public sector union in the country. These are socialist Marxist organizers. They are training your children to be good little soldiers in the Marxist army. Schools are being turned into political staging grounds. I think that they've really gone too far. They are overplaying their hand. They look at what happened in Minnesota with the ICE Out movement. They see that as success. It's a success that they're trying to replicate now all over the country. Teachers unions like the NEA have been actively and relentlessly encouraging other teachers, administrators, school districts to shut down today, Friday, May 1st. Where they haven't been successful, they are encouraging for students to walk out of classes. These kids have been recruited for action and they're about to be deployed. School districts in Chicago and in North Carolina have officially shut down for the full day. Students will be marching out of the classroom with their teachers in solidarity. These May Day organizers have put schools and school children directly in their crosshairs. That's what makes this protest so different, so unusual, and so concerning. When you consider that the NEA has toolkits and classroom supplemental materials, you have to ask yourself, are we talking about education, or are we just watching political organizing happen directly in the classroom? Teachers' unions are driving this, turning classrooms into these incubators for activism. In fact, Defending Education just released a bombshell report that showed $1 billion of teachers' unions' money going directly into far-left political causes and the Democrat Party. They're voting to fundamentally transform the United States of America. And boy, do these organizations not want parents to have rights. They see children as a function of the state. They see children as political operatives. And you know they don't care about children. All you have to do is look up the proficiency rates of the kids in your school district. They don't care that your children can't write a complete sentence. They don't care that our kids aren't prepared for high school, and then they're not prepared for college, and then they're not prepared to go out into the workforce. On their social media, they show pictures of teachers with children holding signs, political signs that demand that teachers and administrators be paid more money. Really, do you think that fifth graders care about how much money their teachers make? Do you think that these kids even understand the causes that they are standing up and fighting for? In the case of the Madison Metropolitan School District, when you consider that the vast majority of the kids that are protesting against ICE in the streets come from affluent suburban neighborhoods, and yet these kids have this fantastic story that they tell about the kids being dragged out of their school by ICE agents. So when school districts like the Madison Metropolitan School District accommodate political walkouts and activism tied to May Day protests, parents see a pattern. That pattern is ideological activism taking a front seat and academics way in the back. How can parents trust the school district? Many of them don't. And that's why there are declining enrollment numbers. It's getting to the point of a crisis. Parents, if you have children in school districts like the Madison Metropolitan School District, you must stand up, you must speak, you must fight back against this outrageous type of behavior. You don't have to agree with me on politics. Maybe you're not a conservative at all. Fair-minded, reasonable people can reason together and say, classrooms are not for political activism. They are not for recruitment. Classrooms are not where teachers can go to create good foot soldiers for any political cause, especially a selfish one in which they are trying to get demands made for their profession. Using kids for a pay raise, telling kids fantastic tales that they repeat. These are kids that are compelled to be in the classroom. They are compelled to listen to this garbage. Many are so young, they don't have the mental capacity to resist the brainwashing that they are exposed to every single day. This isn't right. It's not moral. It's not fair. It's not the job of a teacher. There are good teachers out there. I think the majority of them do not subscribe to this kind of behavior, but they do end up caving to the bullying. And that has to stop too. I'm here in DC today. We're going to go to these May Day protests, so stay tuned. Well, I hear your dog in the background.
Oh, you can hear them. Zoom usually, when I use Zoom, it, what do you call it? It filters them out.
Yeah, that's okay, because my dog is always, Gigi is if she gets outside, she will be barking up a storm. But so, well, joining me today is Sarah Westall. I'm so glad that you could be here, and I look forward to talking with you. We're starting an off-air conversation, and I thought let's record this because I was talking about our reach on YouTube and how difficult it is for us to get traction. However, when I recorded an interview with my friend, great guy, great family man, Terry with American Principles Project, and we were talking about fathers and the role of fatherhood and their upcoming. They did a movie, and I don't think it's been released yet, but it was all about the importance of dads and fathers, and I'm all for that. And that video had 116,000 views, and a lot of my other content, if we get a couple hundred views or 1,000 views, I'm happy. And mostly I'm interviewing women because we're Moms for Liberty. It's a female focused organization. And you had some thoughts on that I thought were interesting.
Well, it's all theoretical at this point for me because I've been experiencing it for a while too. And I think I've come to the conclusion, and I think this makes sense. There's so few of us in this area that are kind of pioneering this as women. Being us to reach, they want to create that divide of male versus female. And they want women who are more we come across as more moderate, I think, but we're more about freedom and liberty. And they just do not want us to reach across the aisle or reach kind of I think we represent more than middle of the country, or at least I do. And I think it's a broader representation, but they want to pigeonhole me into one little section. And I think they work like crazy to make sure that women don't get to see other women talking or anybody that we could reach. I've come to that conclusion. I don't have proof behind it, but I refuse to believe that that only men are who people want to listen to. I mean, really?
Yeah. And how many years have you done this? You've been doing this a long time.
I've been doing it since 2013. So it's been 2012 or something like that. So it's been a while.
Yeah. And you're a pioneer. And frankly, I didn't until I was made aware of your show. I didn't come across it through the algorithm. And you would think that I would. You would think that a female my age, that I would be directed towards your content. But I had someone had to tell me about you, and then I had to go find you.
I have to grow by word of mouth. It's like, what? That's how you grow. It's all organic. And you would think that the algorithms would support females. I actually think that there is a war. And I don't like to be a victim, right? I don't like to talk about, I like to be on the edge of change, forefront, making a difference, never like to wallow in victimhood. And I don't think this is calling out what's happening. I don't think is victimhood. I think there's an attack on women and children. I think there's an attack on men too. But I think part of the attack on women is to create that divide and make sure we're not heard and keep us in our frickin', footstep or something. They want to make sure that people like us who are independent, free-thinking people are not heard. And I think they do that to independents across the board, but I think they do it to women a lot harder because they would serve me up, if you will, to someone like you. And I don't get any of that. So but I refuse to believe that that's the way human beings are naturally. I refuse to believe that women are so not listened to. I just don't think that's true.
I don't believe it because it doesn't reflect my real world experiences, because I have friends who are Democrat women, very good friends. And yes, there's subjects that we avoid to maintain our friendship.
Sure.
We have very different opinions, but we respect each other. We each think that the other is a good person. They just have some different views. And honestly, when we talk, if you can really talk and hear, there's reasoning behind it, and there's not these extremes. So I can interact and have relationships and family members with people that don't think exactly like me.
That's right.
But it's made to believe that that's something that's just impossible to do, that can't happen. And it does happen. I think that if both of us were quote unquote trad wives that were making homemade bread and saying how like you should just nothing against, because I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. But if all I aspired to is like, I'm just going to make bread, live on a farm, and like, then maybe it'd be gangbusters. But because being thoughtful and I think normal and relatable, why is that content not exploding? We do really well on X. When I do our live streams on X, we are beating, in the conservative category, we will beat sometimes every major male talk show, some with millions of subscribers. And we're just this little podcast that I'm doing from my daughter's old bedroom, and we can do well. So why?
Yeah, because you're representing a decent organization too, so that helps our bigger organization. But still, you're right, and I do think it's suppression. A strong female voice, which is I come across as like a strong but more moderate. I don't think I come across as extreme, and there's nuances in what I say. Yes. I think it would resonate across the board, and we don't get a chance to get there. And my views tend to be more, I'm more libertarian. I'm more liberty oriented. This is a great platform for me. But at the same time, I think the country in general is, other than the extremes, I really believe that is, I listen to all media, and I'll listen to NPR a lot because I want to hear where things are at. And I'm like, you know what? The majority of what they're saying, we all agree with. I don't agree with the propaganda that's like 30% of what's going on there. Yeah. But when it comes down to the issues and things, there's a lot we can agree on. And I believe that a lot of the people that listen to them, the ones who aren't extreme and have some kind of weird thing going on, I think they would listen to me too, and you. Yeah. And so I think it's an artificial divide that they're creating. And it's that continued attack on, I think everybody, like I said, I think everyone's being attacked, but I really think women and children are being attacked, because when you're at war, you need to break down the family. You need to attack women and children. It demoralizes the community. And I think there's something like that underneath. I mean, this is the first time I'm talking about it, but I've been thinking about it for a long time, because it does not make sense.
It doesn't make sense that there's so few female podcasters, so many that have success. I think that they quit early on. It's a hard struggle. Like, it's hard to look at the numbers. It's a difficult thing to keep doing. And then I think they give up, and it becomes a male dominated space. And I would like to see more women and women that are relatable. And that's kind of what I've tried to be. But there needs to be some younger voices than myself, but relatable younger voices, not espousing things that are just unrealistic because I have 4 daughters, and a lot of what I hear on the conservative side from women is really, she can't even relate to it. She is a nurse. She has a 2-year-old. She's has another on the way, and she has to work. And she is doing her best. Like, she chose nursing. She was in pre-med and she chose nursing so she could work 3 days a week and have more time. And she likes to work. So if the message is don't work, bake bread, and that's how you're a good woman, then she feels kind of, well, that doesn't relate to me. Am I a bad person? And we don't want to send that message, especially since most of the conservative women on the air are obviously working. And
That's right.
Like Carolyn Levitt, like that's an inspirational, that's someone to look up to. And a lot of the women that when I'm in DC and I meet at the White House, they have children and they're balancing and they're doing their best and they're good wives, good mothers, and they're also working. So, I think that's the relatable image that I think sort of the legacy doesn't want conservative women to see.
Yep, they don't want conservative women to see strong women. And there's nothing in the message of liberty that says you can't, liberty applies to both males and females equally, right? And liberty means that you have the right to make a living. You have the right to make your own decisions. You have the right to be free. And being free is something that for some reason, it only applies to men, in people's minds. Being free means we are free to work. We are free to raise kids. We are free to be the type of person we want to be. And they want to put us in a box and say we're only able to be a certain way. That's not what liberty and freedom is. And for some reason, they'll fight, this movement will fight for freedom, but not for women. And I don't know where that cognitive dissonance is, but I refuse to embrace that. I refuse to embrace that it's a contradiction, right? And I fought against COVID because we weren't free. They were restricting us. It's all the same thing. If I believe in liberty, then I believe in this, right? And so that message, they don't want women to hear that. And I don't think that, I think conservative values doesn't mean that you don't absolutely care about your children, number one, but it doesn't mean that you are no longer important, right? Yeah. And I think there's a mix in that. And I grew up very much in a Christian environment. I was never taught that women, I had all three sisters, it was two sisters, there was three of us. I never believed for a moment that we weren't as capable as our brothers, and the problem is that the difference is that I also don't want to put them down either. I want to raise them up as much as possible. I think raising us up is also raising them up, right? Let's raise everybody up. Let's have a different environment here where their suppression is not one-sided. It's nobody gets suppressed. And I think that when your children, your daughters see you as a strong person and your daughter sees your husband as respecting that, they feel better and they thrive. I think the whole message of Jesus and Christianity is how do you maximize thriving? Yeah. And I think that's what love is. You maximize everybody thriving. Yeah. And
I was a stay-at-home mom, and I know sometimes you felt like you were made to feel like you're not good enough if you're not working. And then I know as a working mom, being told like, well, you should be home with your kids. So it's just, so we need to just wipe that out and just have respect for
that's right.
And also for everything, there's a season. There may be a season where you're a stay-at-home mom for a period of years and then you work part-time.
That's right.
You go back
to work. I know dads who stayed at home, right? I know dads who stayed at home, moms, whatever. It's just, you do what works for you. How do you maximize thriving for all involved? Right?
Yes. I mean, and that you're okay. And so that would mean that a lot of women are deeply into the MAHA movement on the conservative side. So that means that translates into if your child is in daycare, that you want to have nutritious food in daycares, and it's okay to talk about daycare, and we should talk about the affordability of it and making sure safe daycares. And these are big topics. And as a conservative, you shouldn't say, well, we want women to be home, or we don't want the government to be at all involved in daycare or subsidizing. Well, I think we have to talk about all of these issues, and as a libertarian, as a conservative, and be real about it. and what are the policies that we can have so that these things are more affordable with less government involvement. So these are complicated topics, and I'm having them more with younger girls in their 20s and their early 30s, especially if they're conservative, and their whole life they've believed that the government should not be involved in subsidizing, but then they have 2 kids and they see the price of daycare and they wonder, how can I do this? How does our family survive? They see the cost of housing, the cost of food, and they start to think, well, maybe the government should be involved in this. Well, what are we doing to counteract all of this? How do we message this? These are the hard, complicated questions that I think, and the other side will just have the government will fix it. The government will fix it.
Well, they want all government. They turn off their brains on stuff. But I think being a conservative doesn't mean that you're also a libertarian, and being a libertarian doesn't mean that you're also a conservative. And I think that our country was founded on libertarian values, on liberty. And I think sometimes the conservatives miss that. I think that they don't realize and don't embrace liberty. And that's something that's an issue. And I think the vast majority of the country does. And we need to get back to that and talk about that. What is a liberty and what does that mean? And how does that reach across the entire country? Yeah. And they don't want, they want 2 divided parties instead of a party that can be where the majority of the people are united. And I do think that the majority of the people in this country are not extreme, and they're willing to have these conversations, and they don't think that women should turn their brains off and only be in a specific role. That doesn't mean, being a mom, that was my number one thing, but I also worked and started businesses and did all this stuff. Now my kids are doing the same thing. And I think that there's value in that. But like I said, I don't think that just being conservative makes you recognize liberty. And I think there's a flaw there. And I think that flaw is what the other side uses against them nonstop. Yeah. And then women are like, yeah, I don't want to be part of that. You treat me like I'm a slave and I'm a nobody and I have no right to have any respect. You don't listen to me. I'm suppressed, all these things. I can't even believe all the comments that I get on the side. I don't want to be part of that. But then they use that against, like the Nick Fuentes thing. I think he's a plant, but I do think that there's an undertone of what he says that does resonate with a lot of the people that are on that far right or on that are in this space. And I think women are repelled by that.
Yes.
But, and I think it's real. And I think it's an attack on family.
Yeah, I do think it's not real. Doesn't reflect the opinion of even very strong conservatives that I know. They are repelled by a lot of that, but there are some
an undertone of it, a light undertone. Yeah,
there's an extreme that likes it, and then the spotlight goes on that extreme, and like, oh look, that's your whole movement, and then the normies or people that you could attract think, oh, they demurred, like I don't want to get involved, that this is all too much. And it's easy for what is radical, like you're in Minnesota. So the things that happen, like Tim Walz, they will try to make into a moderate, especially when they're running. So they'll actively work to make the far left into moderates, but if you're center right, they are going to paint you as the most extreme. And that's always a challenge. It's not easy. It's not fair. And
I think there's a lot of center right people, right? And when you're pretty moderate, but you're kind of to the right, and you grew up in more of a traditional environment, you believe in more of, you just are like, I'm accepting of whatever anybody else wants to do. I'm a libertarian leaning person, but at the same time in my own life, I had a pretty traditional family. I worked, but I was really devoted to my kids. It's just kind of a traditional family. And So I'm center right in that way. I think I'm more fiscally conservative too. I don't think the government should do everything for you. I think you need to stand up on your own. You need to be responsible for yourself. You need to be an adult and all these things. I think it changes the ethos of what you're dealing with in the community when people take responsibility for themselves versus some doing things for you. But that doesn't mean that there can't be some kind of safety net and there can't be things, happening. But I think there's a lot more people than we're made to believe who actually think this way. I don't think it's that rare. But we're made to think that we are extreme and that nobody thinks like us. And like you said, you weren't showing up. Only people can find me are word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
And I believe if I wasn't suppressed, my show probably would do really, really well. And because it does really well, just word of mouth. So they just do. That's where I've come to the theory. They just do not want that message out there. So there's a concerted effort. And you're right. Like Walls being a moderate, he comes across as more of a moderate when you just hear him talk. He's not. Minnesota is a really messed up place. The fact that now, how can they ignore the fraud and at the same time, act like it doesn't exist and do everything they can to keep the investigations going, to keep people's eyes off of it. I mean, really, and then talk about affordability and how there isn't funding for schools and all that stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
How can you do that? You can't. No reasonable person can do that. So these, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that because I do want to talk about Minnesota, but I think what a lot of kids don't understand, and my husband is, he's the one that always, when it comes to topics about taxes and business, I'm like, go talk to Dad. He's the better argument. And what it is what he says is the kids don't understand how the damage that the government has done so that the costs are this high. So they think, well, I need the government to solve it. And what they don't understand is the government broke it. The reason why it costs so much for childcare is because the government subsidizes over half of kids in daycare. And when that happens, well, then if you own a daycare and the government's going to give you this much money, well, you're going to charge everyone that certain amount of money. When you live near a military base and the BAH, the basic housing assistance, is set to, let's say, $2,000 a month. Guess what happens to every 1-bedroom apartment in the vicinity of that military base? They put it to that amount because they know that's what the government gives. It's not worth that much, but it's artificially set. So everyone pays way too much for housing because of the way that it's structured. And that government involvement in these things often this isn't a free market anymore. It's a market controlled by the government.
Yeah, and I would extend it further. I think that goes both ways, and set price can actually lower the value too. I mean, you have to match. True. Yeah, from a marketing standpoint, you have to match what the prevailing going rate is. But I would say that the real messed up thing is the fiat currency and the increase of interest and the devaluation of the dollar is what is really, really hurting people. And that's a hidden thing that most people don't understand. And that is destroying they like to use the word affordability. Well, it's because of our fiat currency that keeps depreciating, and everything is more expensive because the dollar is worth less. And so all of our savings, it eats into our savings every single time that thing goes up by 3%, let's say. It's been going up a lot steeper over the last few years at a faster clip, like 10%. But every time it goes up by any percent, that's how much our savings goes down, because we can buy that much less. And so in some ways it helps you, because let's say you have a loan that's, $300,000. If the dollar goes down and you get an increase to help yourself, then that loan, I know it starts to be complicated. It's not that complicated. Then the loan actually is less. A $300,000 loan 20 years ago would feel so much bigger than a $300,000 loan now. And that's because of the depreciation of the dollar.
So, and what about debt? Because oftentimes, how is the debt affecting the affordability?
Well, the debt means that we can't use our own resources to help our own people, that we're putting money back into debt. But debt is kind of an illusionary thing in the sense that there really are resources and things that we can do to decrease our debt. And the debt is used as a vehicle to keep this whole charade going. But at the same standpoint, it cuts us off. It makes it so we're not as flexible and we don't have the freedom to do everything we need to do as a country. It's a way to hold us into a pattern that we shouldn't have to. When your family has debt, you let's say you have debt, but you know there's resources that you're not able to get to, and you could pay that debt off. You would pay it off so that you'd have more freedom, as long as those resources are something that you could reasonably depart from, or you could use properly, and you didn't really need them for another reason. But you would want that freedom, right? But if you have debt and you have no freedom, you spend all your extra resources to pay off that debt. What does that do? Your family has no way to maneuver. You have no future, really. It's crushing on your family.
And you couldn't manage a crisis.
That's right. That's the kind of situation that they keep putting our country in. I mean, it's a little different, but it's that they can print money and they have a little bit more flexibility with that. But essentially, they're putting us in that box. And there are solutions to get that debt paid off. And the other reason is that we don't have enough people who are in Congress and the Senate and Congress to who understand any of this. We don't have really good business people, just like we don't really have good tech people. We have a lot of attorneys, and yeah, it's great that you have that skill set, but we need people with these other skill sets as well, so that we can manage this country. And our country's been going sideways because we don't have these skill sets. And then what's happening is that you have to depend on these bureaucrats that have been that are been throughout all these different administrations. They call them the deep state because they're the only ones that have any kind of experience. And we've also learned that only about 15% of anything that Congress votes on, only about 15% of how the government is managed that Congress has influence over. Wow. I mean, things have gotten so skewed that, that's a big thing. People don't realize that.
85%.
Yeah, people don't realize that. We're all focused. They got the whole country focused and diverted on this 15%. And then even on that 15%, you got us all divided. And so hardly anything happens. Meanwhile, the majority of this stuff is just chugging along with people who have been bureaucrats and running this country. That's why the NGOs and all these things are running everything. That's why I love Doge. Doge uncovered so much stuff. It got creamed by the deep state, who was getting paid a lot for this. I mean, people have to know that was attacked. They did not want that transparency because that was the money train. And Doge uncovered a lot. It was one of the best things. I have this kind of weird, I'm not sure what to think of Elon Musk, but holy crap, did he do the country a favor when he did that. The sad part is it wasn't able to meet its fruition. And it wasn't able to, be the promise that it could have been because it had so many headwinds.
The way that they went, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert on this, but it seems like the way that they went after him and really just tried to crush his whole business, how far they were willing to go. And when someone like Elon Musk, I think, essentially is like, I don't know if there's anything more I can do. That to me was a little scary because he's a pretty powerful guy.
Well, I think that shows you that any one business person isn't all that powerful at the end of the day. I mean, he has a lot of influence, but he's only one person. And then that's why we always say that even the president, it takes all the people, because any one person gets shut down. Marjorie Taylor Greene was in charge of the Doge committee. I mean, that was her. She was the chairman of Doge. So there's something weird there too. I would love to get her on my show and ask her what the hell happened there, because she's not talking about it publicly.
Yeah.
So something happened.
Something happened because it was big. I mean, it's all we were talking about, and then we weren't.
Then Marjorie Taylor Greene suddenly out and at odds with everybody, and she was the chairman of that committee. What the
Yeah.
heck happened?
It's all, there's a lot of weird things going on, but to get back now, you've got an extensive background, so you understand a lot about the issues that we're talking about right now with the economy, and so I appreciate what you're saying, because I don't hear it enough. I really don't. There's a lot that I try to understand, but it's complicated. I'm a political science major.
Well, I have a business and an engineering background, and I taught business at the University of Minnesota. But I think that most people just don't have the exposure to it, and the way it's taught is more confusing than it needs to be. I like to simplify it, because if you look at it from your own family standpoint, it really is similar to that. It's just at a larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
Those same concepts are the same, just big picture government. And these big financial institutions wrap all these complicated terms around things, and then average people don't understand them. They don't have to be that complicated. As soon as things become all wrapped in all these complicated terms, and they can't talk to you about it in a simple form, that starts they're either purposely confiscating, they're purposely making it confusing, or two, they don't understand it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people look at the inflation, everything that's happened since COVID. There was probably a hope that President Trump could come in, snap his fingers, and everything could go back to what they would call normal. And there's frustration like that things aren't the way they were when he was president in 2019. And I think it's understand that things are a lot more complicated than I think what people thought.
Yeah, and I think the complications come from everybody fighting and not understanding. I think the complications are people more than the actual. I mean, the issues are complicated too, to a certain degree, just because there's so many variables, not because any one thing isn't capable we're not capable of understanding. It's just there's so many inputs and variables. That's what makes it complicated. But the people part is the hardest.
So if I'll ask a big questions probably, but to explain in the simplest way possible, what happened between 2020 and 2024 during the Biden years? What were the things that happened that were the most crippling to our economy that have contributed to where we are now?
I think the printing of the dollar was the worst thing. That created massive inflation. And it gets back to what I was talking about before. During COVID, they did massive printing. And fraud. It's like taking your credit card and maxing them out. And then now as a family, you have to go forward, where it's not affordable to your family because you're spending all your money paying off your credit cards.
Yeah. And
that's the situation that we're in. And plus, I think it also created this extreme frustration with the government. And so we're in a heightened, in some ways that's helpful because it got more people to pay attention. In other ways, it created more extremes everywhere.
And flooding so much money that I in Wisconsin and in our public school system, there's still unspent funds. There was so much money given that we haven't even spent all of it yet.
Well, that's a wonderful situation. I mean, Minnesota just stole all of it and went to everybody. So it's better in Wisconsin because at least you guys can use the funds. But yeah, that's the biggest problem. And the amount of money that was used elsewhere and around the world, and because we can't audit the Federal Reserve, it's incredible. Auditing, that's why I was saying Doge and what they audited, and the fact that they found 15 computers that were just printing money. I mean, we don't even, I think that was part of the reason why Elon Musk left too, is he's like, what's the freaking point when you have these like computers that are just printing money? You guys don't even, this is a freaking joke.
And Social Security running on a computer system that was from the 80s or 90s. And I know this for a fact because we've been having to deal with this with with my mother-in-law. And my husband is just shocked. He's dealing with the Social Security office that their systems haven't been updated since the late 80s. And I think it's because it's easier to perpetuate fraud.
Yeah, well, it was one big fraud funnel, and Minnesota is such a great microcosm of what the whole country is. There's other fraud schemes going on elsewhere, like Arizona and their mortgage fraud. I had Senator Fincham on to talk about the mortgage fraud, and there, I've had other people there as well who have done forensic, audits or not an audit that's government sanctioned, but they come in and just really check it out, and that's what they've been doing for years. And they're saying that the entire government of Arizona is so intertwined with fraud that they're worried that if they actually clean it up, the government would collapse and the economy would. I'm like, well, I don't know if I believe that, because I always think that cleaning things up makes the economy stronger in the long run. What it does mean is that you need to bring in better business minded people and not just have bureaucrats that don't have a clue about finance. You need to have the finance people come in, bring in people with the skill set to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But because cleaning things up always makes things better, right? You will always be better when you clean things up. And stealing, but if you notice, some of the communities that are best are being funded by drug money, and unfortunately by human trafficking money, because human trafficking makes more money than drugs. But anyways, they had mortgage to launder that money, and they would do things through mortgage scams, and the judges and all these officials were in on it. Still are, and they would take out a mortgage for $600,000, and then there would be a shadow transaction for like $60 million, of which all this money then was laundered. I mean, this so there's schemes all over the place, and they look the other way, because all these politicians, they talk a big talk in front of the camera. Yep. But they roll up their sleeves and act like they're doing things, and then don't ever do anything, probably because they're part of the problem. They're probably getting a lot of money behind the scenes. If you were worth Ilhan Omar, how does she go in being an average person and now worth $68 million? That does not happen. That's not possible.
So what have you seen evolve in Minnesota over time? When did this start, and how did it get this bad?
Well, I think obviously the corruption. I don't think that Democrats own the corruption. I think it's a dual party situation. Otherwise, things would have been cleaned up sooner. And if one party was bad and one was angels, they would have been talking about it openly forever. And it just started talking about it openly once the internet came out and people like us started talking about it and forcing their hands. Mm-hmm. But so that gives you an indication, people who are out there thinking it's just one party, then why did suddenly they just start complaining about it now? That's because of people like us having a bigger voice. But, and it's not everybody isn't bad, right? And not on both sides. The one thing that's true is that the average person in this country, Democrat or Republican, do not want fraud. Now, don't think for a moment that, the average person wants fraud, because that's not true. Now, but in Minnesota's case, the Democrats have been the ones who, because they've been the ones in power, and they're the ones who have been stealing the most money, and they're the ones that are covering it up, and they're the ones that are benefiting. And the Republican, the most of them, not all, because I'm sure some of them are getting some kickbacks, are the ones that have been fighting to make a difference. But Minnesota, I think, got really bad once they started getting control of all houses. And then this extreme faction came in that they don't. I think there is a Somalian deal here. Like, I don't like to really say all Somalians are bad and they're garbage and all that. That's awful. That's not how you do it. And I also don't think it's a color of skin thing, because let me explain, because it's a culture thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. They happen to be Black, but there are other people who are Black who are raised here who don't think that way. Yeah. It's a culture thing. And in Somalia, they have been the government is so corrupt. It's so out of control that the culture is such that they don't even view rules. There isn't a rule. Like, we grew up understanding the value of not stealing and being frugal and having responsibility for ourselves. They were in such a corrupt environment. In order to survive, they had to steal, they had to bribe, they had to cheat. And they learn that as a way of survival. And then they don't think it's a problem. And so that's why the Somalian culture, the ones who haven't assimilated, a lot have. If they were born here and they assimilated and learned some of this, they don't all think that way. But the ones who do, and that culture gets spread across how they interact, that's why you're seeing so much fraud in that community. And then they have outsized power in the political party, in the Democrat Party, where they are not questioned otherwise. And then they've weaponized racism. And if you question them, then you're a racist. No, we're questioning them because they're stealing and they don't respect our laws.
You're right about the culture, because too, I have friends in the area that I live. There's a large community of, whether they're Russian, Ukrainian, that have legally immigrated to America to escape. Some of them go as far back as before the wall fell, so escape early communism, and some younger just to escape the whole society that exists there. And they will just, it's so corrupt. The way business is so corrupt. The way politics, it's so different. And I've had long conversations, and it's shocking to me the way you would run a small business, and that it's just absolutely mob style. It's crazy.
That's right. And that's just what they know. And they don't, and if you can steal and you can funnel money out of the government, then you are actually doing good. You're actually successful.
And most of those that have emigrated here are also Christians or devout Jews, but they have been raised in this religious environment where they have those morals and mores. And when they emigrated here, they welcomed this culture and they wanted to assimilate. They wanted to learn the language, and this is the life they wanted for themselves and their children, which is very different. And it's not as large scale, massive assimilation. It's one family, one person that gets to escape and maybe bring another. It didn't happen so fast. And I'm Hispanic, and I'll tell you, in the Hispanic culture, especially if you're from Mexico, I was just talking to my friends who are legal immigrants and born and raised in Mexico, and it is a normal thing to be kidnapped off the side of the road. It's a normal thing to have a family member disappeared and never see them again, and you never talk about it because of the way that things are run in Mexico. So they're very afraid of the government. They put their head down and you don't say anything. So when you bring that into America, and then you have a political party that sort of captures them, it's sometimes easy to see why, there can be kind of a monoculture. And I think Trump's success was breaking that up and, starting to have libertarian and free market ideas and liberty. That here in this country, it doesn't have to be that way. But it's, again, I still think no matter what, the Democrats and the left, I shouldn't even say party, the left, still have a monopoly over a lot of these new immigrants.
Well, they don't even understand what made us great in the first place. Make America great again is getting back to these traditional values. And it's the traditional libertarian values that we're talking about. Not necessarily Christian values, although Christian is a lot of what underlies this, but not the Christian right. I think there's a difference, and I'm sorry if you're Christian right, but some of those things are not libertarian oriented. Yeah. It's about freedom and valuing and self-responsibility, and that self-responsibility and picking yourself up by the bootstraps is what created this country. And that is what we need. Like my husband's from Mexico, and my children are Mexican too, half Mexican. And some of the Mexicans are the hardest working, amazing people, right? They have a work ethic like no other. And that is incredible, right? It's unfortunate that they also have a lot of corruption there, because that work ethic, if they have that work ethic with a government that's not corrupt, they'd probably be the best in the world. I mean, that work ethic is absolutely incredible. Like, holy crap. So it's really a sad situation that they have that and they can't lift themselves up because they're holding themselves down. And one thing, and the other thing is the people being kidnapped. My brother-in-law was kidnapped once. Kind of already this story where he was kidnapped and they took his money. He went to an ATM, took his money, and then they waited 12 hours and took more. And then they asked him if they were really nice kidnappers. And they said, "Is there anything you want to keep?" And he said, "Yeah, I want my watch because this means a lot to me and my grandma." They let him keep his watch. They took everything else. And then they asked him where he needed to go. And then they gave him money to a cab ride to go to where he needed. I mean, because kidnapping is like so normal. But then then their cousin fought back. And he didn't fight back. He was just respectful to him. The cousin fought back and they beat the crap out of him, stripped him naked and threw him on the side of the road. So, I mean, that's just two members in our family that's been.
No, I just heard a recent story just recently where a similar situation where someone was kidnapped in their family and he was respectful. They took the car, the wallet, then they dropped him off and he had to make a call and then they left. And I was horrified that this happens a lot. This, it's just something you live with.
And you be respectful, and most of the time they're not going to hurt you, but you have to be careful about that. It's terrible. Yeah. And then they also, I had, my brother-in-law had a baby who needed surgery and he had to take his money out of the bank and the bank tipped off the robbers. And then he, down the street a block away, they had machine guns on his car, taking his money, just took out of the bank for the surgery. So but that corruption is built in. So it's really sad because the average person there is such a hard worker that if they didn't have that other layer, like I said, that work ethic with a government that functions properly could be the best in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but to understanding what I think if people are confused as to why the manipulation of these new immigrants, and I think that there are people that know how to manipulate, and they bring populations in and they manipulate them for their votes in order to. This is a way.
Oh, for sure, it's all.
But on the right, I wouldn't say that they need workers. They need people to do things that they'll say that Americans don't do, and that's the corruption on. So there's corruption.
But there's always some truth to a lot of this, right? Mm-hmm. There's truth to what everyone says, and then they weaponize the truth to the extreme. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. And the personal passion I have is the human trafficking, and that underpinning our funding a lot of the activities. Yeah, you can't have a country with a soul with that being the underpinning of a lot of activity. You can't. That can't be anything that funds our. You can't. You can't be that rotten at its core and function.
Do you think Americans understand how treacherous the human trafficking is, and that it is a bigger money maker than drugs? Do you think it's really steeped in? Because I don't think enough people know. I don't think they want to accept this, that human trafficking is so prevalent in America, and it makes a lot of money for very bad people.
Well, there was a congressional report that was done under Obama that I can't find anymore. It was scrubbed from the internet, but I had it, and I didn't realize back then that I needed to save everything. And this was in like 2016 timeframe, and they showed there was about 300,000 kids that were brought in from South America during a certain point of time for trafficked, and it was a Senate investigation. They know how many of these kids are being trafficked, and it's incredible that there's a blind eye turned to all of this. It's because the people who traffic know that good people don't want to see it. They can continue doing it. They won't do anything because it's too horrifying, clutching our pearls and being horrified. So we would rather ignore it and act like it doesn't exist. And so if they do it in the shadows, nobody will ever do anything to you because the average person is too fragile to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be mean, because I have a hard time doing it, covering it nonstop too. It's too hard for me to do it all the time, but we can't be so fragile that we don't take care of an evil like this.
Yes, there's a lot of moms and Moms for Liberty. This is a very passionate subject, and they are fighting for legislation in their states, and fighting for legislation in Congress that that puts that to address it. And so it's become it. Obviously, we're moms and we're horrified. And I think once you know what's going on, you're trying to do everything you can to stop it. And you see a lot of the anti-ICE protesters, and I talked to one individual that was very supportive of them, and they were talking about human trafficking, and I said, well, I think one of the reasons why I support strong borders is because of I want to limit the human trafficking, and I think that with open borders, it's just unchecked and out of control.
It was. And you asked back then about the Biden administration. They were purposely doing that. It was, I have Andy Schekman on every other week, and we do a show on the, a financial review every Friday. And I have different prominent voices that come on my show. And one of the things that he always said, and I agree with him 100%, he always said, this is too stupid to be stupid. They were doing things that made no sense, but anybody with a brain, it was too stupid. It was like if you were just incompetent and you weren't doing something, it would have been better, right? It was like they were deliberately doing economic and things to harm our country that you had to consciously think about. And one of those was the immigration.
Yeah. No, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. What we were doing during the Biden administration was just so horrifying. I remember living it. Like, I don't understand this. This just doesn't make sense. We're doing.
And how did the Democrats how did people that support him not see it? That's what I don't understand. And that's why they don't want people to listen to shows like mine or yours, because they might see it if they listen to us.
How do so many women in America, and you've witnessed it in real time in Minnesota with the protests, and so many of them are women, and they're more affluent, middle-class women. How is it that women just don't see what's happening? Because I have to.
Because they don't listen to. I think it circles back to what we were talking about at the beginning. These moderate voices are totally suppressed. They will not let them listen to us. My voice, that's why I got my lawsuit going on. I just landed last week suing the federal government and Google.
Oh, what was that about?
I have a landmark lawsuit against the United States government and Google for everything that they did to me specifically. But I had, we sued them initially. There's a group of us that sued them initially in 2020 when they took us down. I call it the day the internet died, where they just took everyone down that one day. They took people down before and after, but there was that huge operation. It was October 20th, 2020, I believe. And they took everyone down. And then we sued Google. There's a group of 15 of us, and then we went to the Ninth Circuit, and they lied. Google lied in court and said that they were acting alone, and that they took us down acting alone. And so there wasn't any government coercion. And now, since then, there's been enough information that's come out and in the Senate that Google lied, and that there was significant government coercion. They admitted it in a letter in Congress that Jordan was running this committee, Jim Jordan, and so we sued, and then they allowed me. There's a whole bunch of details on this, so they lied. But anyways, they also put they wouldn't let my show back up, my channel. And then they allowed impersonation channels up that were monetized, putting all my content up, monetized, but yet I couldn't go up. And they wouldn't take the monetization channels down. They wouldn't take any of those channels down when I was trying to reach them. I had to have 3 legal letters before. It wasn't until the third one where it said, we're suing you, that it was taken down. On top of that, they had, because I was so suppressed and shadow banned, that information came up, all the fake stuff came up, and then a whole bunch of porn star connections to me came up on the first search page of Google. None of my own content. It was all the fake crap and then a bunch of porn star connections. And the porn star stuff. So I had to sue them. I'm like, I can't. Any self-respecting person now has to sue these guys. And now they push me into a corner to sue them. And now I'm freaking suing them and I'm going all the way. And because they forced me to, these a-holes forced me to. And because I had to in order to have any self-respect. If I wanted to do this job at all, I had to. And they have this tool called Google Safe Search. Gemini helped me. I learned Google Gemini has been my friend. I asked them, how in the world could porn stuff be related to me on the front page of Google search? And they said because the Google Safe Search didn't work. They had to manually or somehow shut that thing down because all porn star references would not come up on a Sarah Westall podcast. You know, say a search, I search for Sarah Westall podcast and all this porn stuff comes up. That means Google Safe Search failed. And that means it was probably taken down. Somehow it was disabled. And then because it was disabled, it created this vacuum on top of all the shadow banning, and it was weaponized against me. And the other thing is that it was Rumble videos that came up associated with me. And Rumble is in their own lawsuit because Rumble's videos, none of Rumble's videos come up in Google search, except with me and porn star stuff. Wow. So, you know, there was something manipulated inside of Google to allow that to happen. And so I didn't have a choice. I had to sue them to get all this down. And it was up. We saw it and it was up for 2 weeks after we saw it. For a whole 2 weeks it was up, but I don't know how long it was up before I even noticed it was up. Yeah. So and then there was the porn star confession stuff that related was one thing, but then there was really crude stuff. Like, I mean, I don't know if I can I repeat? I don't even know if I want to repeat it because it's so bad.
Yeah. You know? but
it's so bad. And it's like that. If a 12-year or an 8-year-old was looking for my podcast, you know, that's cool. They would see all this stuff. And some of the words were so crude that there was no way that Google Safe Search. So I'm suing them and I'm suing the government. And it's a landmark case because we are arguing that the Ninth Circuit is structurally incapable of handling this case because it's structurally biased and not capable of giving anybody a fair justice in that system. And we have 2 decades of evidence to prove that they are biased beyond measure and that you cannot go into that court system in Google's backyard because they will not allow you to have justice.
Ninth Circuit, that's California?
It's California is part of the thing, but it's Silicon Valley. Yeah. And it's so captured that they won't give people even a shot. They shut them down right away. They do not give us due process. And that is a failure. It's when your court systems are so broken that people don't even have a shot to getting justice. You don't even allow the discovery or allow the evidence to come forward. Then the court system, we no longer have a court system. And so we're arguing, we preemptive, because we know we filed in DC and we know they're going to try to move it back to California. And we preempted it and said, no, you are too structurally biased and people are incapable of having a fair trial in that entire system. And we have decades to prove it. And we are the first in the history of US law to do that.
Well, I wish you all the luck. The Ninth Circuit is the circuit that struck down I believe is the first circuit in California that told the State Department of Education in California that they cannot secretly transition young minor children, and I'm talking middle school children, behind the backs of parents. And so when that first decision came, we were cheering, and then it went to the Ninth Circuit and they struck it and said, yep, the State Department of Education can mandate that schools hide keep secret a gender transition of kids. They were keeping separate records, separate medical records. Violating
and the Ninth Circuit, so you see, Ninth Circuit is so damaged. It's so damaged that you can't get any kind of unbiased, reasonable justice in that court system right now. And that's just another indication.
Without the Supreme Court oh my gosh, because the Supreme Court struck it down. That was Mirabelli v. Bonta. The Supreme Court said, nope, the parents have the primary responsibility of raising kids and instilling their values, and you cannot have these social transitions which lead to medical transitions, and they're working with kids to emancipate them from parents. It's the stuff
that's what Minnesota wants to do too. Yeah.
Yes.
It's incredible. What is wrong with these people? And so our basic value, our judgment, but they won't even it's amazing that the California, that means that not all judges are bad. It's just the whole circuit.
Yes.
But they've lost touch of what made us great. And so the MAGA movement had a purpose, and I hope we don't lose that sight of what that purpose is. But I got to do this plug. I'm trying to raise money for, I've paid for the whole initial, getting this filed and going, but we're going to need help because it's going to be really expensive. And to get it going, it was like, okay, this is me. It's my lawsuit. I'll pay for it. And then people are like, Sarah, this is for the country and you need to have help. And you shouldn't take, you're suing the federal government and Google for crying out loud. You should be asking for some money, especially because this case is going to help a lot of other cases with how we're attacking this. It is first in U.S. history, and it's going to help all the other cases that they are doing for this, for free speech and for the First Amendment, and also displacement of the big one is also making a decision. It's not just First Amendment, it's freedom of speech, which is important, obviously. It's also making a decision on who can make money. It's economic displacement. It's saying these people can make money. You can't do this, but only legacy media, only the people we decide, only the businesses we decide, and not just media businesses. Any business in any territory on the internet, we can make a decision on who we serve up to people.
Yeah, freedom of speech, but if no one can hear what you're saying because they've made it impossible, then how that to me is questionable. That these and
it's like an economic thing.
Isn't the way the Google do they get any sort of any coverage legally that they shouldn't have?
Well, yeah, because Section 230 gives them immunity, and that's what these court systems were shutting down, saying they have the right to do everything. Shut Section 230, you have immunity. It didn't give them immunity to take over our entire country and decide who makes money, who doesn't, and sway all elections and have control over everything. Mm-hmm. That's not what this thing was about. The Section 230 was to allow a free marketplace of ideas and give them cover to be able to allow that, because they knew they were going to be attacked for allowing a free marketplace of ideas and to not be an editor. But they've taken that immunity and turned it into, they get to be an editor, decide who gets to see what, and control elections. They get to decide who makes money. They get to decide that certain media personalities get to make money and control the messaging. They get to decide and run our entire country when it comes to online stuff, which, let's face it, the majority is happening online now. And we gave them that kind of power. I don't think so. We got to pull our heads out of our behind and say this, if we want to lose our country, we keep that in place. But if we want to have any kind of resemblance of what we had and any kind of liberty and freedom, that cannot stand the way it is. And that's what this fight is about. And it's going to help if we can get to discovery, and even if we can't, this fight is going to help in a lot of ways, because our attorneys are in the forefront of this, and they are learning every time they do this, they're learning how to combat this. And we are farther than we've been in, they've been fighting this for over a decade, and they are the most knowledgeable in the industry that I have found. There's other people who've been fighting it too that are pretty knowledgeable, but these guys are on the cutting edge, and every single thing that we do is helping them learn how to combat this. And we are making progress. And so I just hope people will help me, fund the rest of this, especially if we get discovery. It's going to be, we're fighting the federal government and Google. So we're going to need some help.
How can people help you?
Let me give you, I don't have to give it. It is End Government Coercion. So it's Gov Coercion is my Give, Send, Go site. GiveSendGo.com. End Gov, G-O-V, Coercion. And then
Okay.
you'll see my press release, you'll see everything. And, we've been talking about making that, once my case goes of maybe making it, if anything doesn't get spent on my case, it's going to spill over to the other cases. I started United for Free Speech, but I think it's so much broader than free speech, even though it's the First Amendment and it's the number one amendment for a reason. When I started realizing how much of they're controlling, I'm like, holy crap, this is like so much broader. And it's so important that we get involved in this. And any dime that you give me will be spent to help fund this legal fee and this legal fund. And anything that doesn't get spent specifically in my case is going to spill over to help others in this area.
Great. And in closing, because you're talking about Google, I mean, what about AI? Because that's something that we're really focusing on in Moms for Liberty, AI in education. But AI is, I mean, if they can do this, do what they did to you, what Google can do that, I just think over to AI.
Well, AI it's moving faster than society is, right? My background, I'm a computer scientist engineer, right? That's my background. So the way the world's going is where I started my career. And I was at the forefront of building up the internet, and actually data modeling, data scientist is really what I started at, and modeling out the entire industry. And I worked at Enterprise at the day, and when I finally left there, I was really young. I was a director of systems design and development, which ran the entire infrastructure for the internet part of it. And we had upwards of 90% of the backbone of the internet in that organization. We were a telecom, and we were usually the baby bells had just regions, but because it was the internet, they gave us the ability to do the entire country. And we had about 90% of the infrastructure of the entire country. And my role was the system design and development supporting that organization. And before I did that, I modeled out did the data infrastructure for that. And I was responsible for that. That is what most people call AI, although I don't think that's AI. I think the true AI is much more sophisticated than that. But so much of what AI is just data reading and large data models. But when you can do so much with just that, the power that you have with just that is absolutely mind-blowing to the average person. And it really needs to be under control. And what's happening, and I cannot stress this enough, is that so much of government processes are moving into this black box of automation. And AI is, they don't even know what AI is doing, because sometimes it takes 3 months to understand the logic behind why a decision was made. And there's so many flaws. Anybody that has developed or been a software engineer knows that there's a lot of bugs in software, and that includes AI. The hallucinations are bugs. And we can't just let that go without people understanding. Where they come up with just BS, right? And it's because there's just flaws in the logic of the AI, and it's because there's coding errors. It's just software code, and people get all confused on what's really happening. Internal to these companies, I know Apple, they won't even use the term AI. They call it machine learning because they think it's BS that people call it AI, because it's just machine learning. But regardless, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it is very extremely powerful on what they can do. But the thing is that what's happening is that government processes are being automated. And while they're using private industry to do a lot of their stuff, NSA and surveillance, they've been spending over $90 billion a year for decades. I'm talking at least 30 years to develop this surveillance system. It's not just Palantir. It's been decades in the process, okay? And they're using these private corporations to build this out. And AI is a big part of it, automation. And so the important thing here is that when you move government processes into this black box, when it was known and people were doing these processes, everybody argued about it. It was part of politics. Suddenly it's in this black box and people don't understand it anymore, and they stop arguing about it. No, that algorithm is what people used to do. That algorithm, you should be able to argue about that specific software algorithm. That means A, we need more transparency, and B, we need a hell of a lot more people understanding at least some basic software knowledge so that we can argue about what's in these black boxes, because we used to argue all the time about what people did. And then as soon as it went into these black boxes, we stopped arguing about it. We cannot do that. That is the end of freedom, period.
So they're having, so a lot.
Does that make sense? I hope that made sense.
Yeah. So a lot of what the government does is being just put into this machine learning to spit out answers or to policy.
Well, it's like we're automating processes, right? Instead of people doing these processes, we're putting it into computer software and allowing the AI and these private organizations and even government organizations to just run it in the background. And we used to argue, it used to be people doing all these jobs. Now it's computer software doing these jobs, which fine, okay, but that still means that we need to understand what it is that they're doing and debate it. Just because software is doing it doesn't mean it's no longer debatable. And I think we've kind of dumbed ourselves down to a point where we just think it's this untouchable thing. And people, and part of that problem is there was only one computer scientist in the entire Congress, 2 electrical engineers, 15 medical doctors. We don't have literacy in our Congress, but yet the entire world is run by big tech. The largest companies in the world are all big tech, and they're larger than anything we've ever seen, from Apple to Google to Microsoft to Amazon to NVIDIA. These are the largest companies the world has ever seen, and the entire landscape of the world has changed. It's no longer big oil, it's big tech, and our entire Congress is illiterate, aside from a few people.
So
that's our issue.
What about secrets? What about strategy? Is all of that going into this machine learning too? I mean, what about, I mean, how well can we know that our secrets are being kept secret or strategy isn't being manipulated?
Well, it depends on what you mean by that. Surveillance means that we're all being surveilled. It's kind of a panopticon of every daily life. Strategy, I don't know what specifically you're referring to.
Our data, our data, the things that we get, the CIA, FBI, the information and the intelligence, and then it's processed. I mean, all of that, is AI involved in that, or do they keep it separate because it's still unstable?
Well, AI, varying degrees. I mean, the software is AI. See, people are confusing things with it. Sophisticated software development is involved in all of it, from non-sophisticated all the way up to sophisticated. And a lot of things that are called AI is barely an if-then statement, meaning just basic logic. And other things like these, ChatGPT and Google Gemini, these are large language models that are looking at sifting through incredible amount of data and then putting logic behind it. And it's pretty sophisticated. And of course, that is being integrated into, with the Palantirs of the world. But this data, it's once you get the data, then you have the ability to do all sorts of things with it. And they've been spending, that's what this whole big tech government partnerships are about. They've been getting, in telecom back in the 80s, they had dual computer systems for telecom information to go to the telecom and then back to NSA. This has been going on forever. And then they use that data to surveil and to do things. And now with the AI, and not even AI, just some more sophisticated software, they're able to sift through this more. As far as our secrets, the Five Eyes have been sharing data and information for quite a while. And there's been agreements to share this data for quite some time. When Obama left office, 2 weeks before he left office, he signed an executive order saying that all the intelligence agencies can now share data. And then we had the act to share data with the Five Eyes. So yeah, our data and how much is being surveilled. We don't know that unless we can get under and when I say it's a big black box and people have the right to understand, the majority of the people are so damn ignorant that they have no idea what's actually going on and how the world's being run. When General Vallely, who people question him, but he's the one that told me 85% of what's happening, Sarah, is being decided by these bureaucrats. And what I'm saying right now, and Congress only has the ability to affect about 15% of what's happening.
Wow. And
That's what I'm talking about.
And with your expertise, what's your opinion of what they're calling AI in education? And however, bringing in more of learning through AI, machine learning, like instead of.
I think done very, very well, it could be really good. I think putting it done in any kind of sloppy way and unconscious way and not knowing that what the heck we're doing, it could be so detrimental that the kids won't learn, and that we will create an entire generations of kids whose brains don't develop properly. And if we're not careful, we will be we'll hurt ourselves for generations. Literally.
That was the sentiment of Melania Trump, and when forming basically, and that's what Tina Deskovich, the CEO of Moms for Liberty, is part of a group, and we're grateful to be represented because we're sort of the voice of the parents, where you have all these big tech and you have all of all the people in government, and then here we are, like we're here. We want to represent parents who are really afraid and concerned about. So we already are concerned about screens in schools and the detrimental effect it's having. So while understanding that AI could have really great beneficial effects, there could be some good. How soon should it be introduced? How young?
And that's a really great question. I think Moms for Liberty are the perfect organization to lead this and champion it and get in front of this. You guys are perfect. And I think the more you guys get involved, the better this country will be. And these little guys, these little kids that are their brains and their development, is going to be in better hands. But I would say that kids should stay away from AI on a regular basis until maybe they're in middle school or high school. Now, there could be this is my opinion that I've been developing over years of thinking about it. There could be classes, they go and take a class and learn how to interact. And so the important thing of having early education with computers is that it becomes a norm for them and that they're not scared. It's not something that, when we learned, well, I know I learned early, but when people learn later, it's clunkier. It's not just part of how you work, and it's not, you'll learn differently, right? It's so much easier if you learn when you're young. So in that way, it's important that they're introduced to it when they're young. So it's just second nature to them. However, the AI part of it, anything that can atrophy their brain and make it so cause it so their brain doesn't develop properly should not be introduced. And we need to be very careful about it. And I do not think that it should be introduced until they're older in that capacity. And even in college, I mean, for example, I use my daughter as an example. When she was in college and she wrote a paper and got a B on it. And she's like, gosh, and she just had ChatGPT write it and she gets an A. What did she learn from that? She learned a hell of a lot more from the B than she learned from the A, but she got an A letting ChatGPT do it. And so she learned that she had to use ChatGPT. And so what's happening is the college professors do not know how to teach with AI. They're starting to learn and get on top of it. But in general, they didn't know. And so we have a whole generation now, a whole class of people that went through for about 6 years at least, who didn't develop the proper skills of learning how to write and learning how to do these things because they knew that if they didn't use ChatGPT, they wouldn't get the proper grades. And so we did them a disservice. And so what happens is I've had some college professors that I've talked to and had on my show, and this is how I use ChatGPT and AIs to write my own stuff. I don't like what it produces. And so what I do is I write it out first, then I let it correct it, and then I interact with it nonstop until I get it exactly the way I want it based on the topics that I want. That interactive process is what the kids need to learn.
Yeah, and you have to have background knowledge to do that. You have to be able to look at what it spits out and say, I don't like that, that's wrong, and that's what I do. I'm like, I want to add this, and then it just kind of, you're using it as a tool, like it is an assistant. But you have to have the knowledge to do that. Otherwise, it looks good to me. Copy, paste.
That's right. Yeah, and it's the same thing with computer science. The developers, the whole computer development is being automated. And so then what's happening is these young engineers, these software developers aren't finding jobs because so much of that work has been automated. And then what's happening is we're not developing broader system architecture skills, broader system engineer skills, software engineers, because that whole class of people are not being hired and it's being automated. But if you don't spend the time developing and doing that work, you're not going to become a good software engineer and a broader system architect. So what companies are starting to learn now is that they need to bring in these college students and then force them, even though they've already have the automation tools, they're forcing them to do it by hand so that they learn and then they can develop the skill sets they need for that next generation. We are automating things that are cutting ourselves off at the kneecaps and not developing other skill sets. And so that's the problem.
So that's good to know, though, because we hear all these jobs will be lost, but there are other jobs we're just going to have to adjust. That yes, there's jobs lost because the AI has developed to a certain point, but there are now there's new skill sets still within the framework of computer science, but we're going to have to teach differently and do different.
We're going to have to force people to do things that the computer can already do and are automated. Like their job is really already automated. It's like, well, I don't want to, companies and businesses and universities are going to have to pay to develop these people, even though those skills are already automated by AI. Otherwise, they're not going to develop the higher level skills that we need to run our society. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have some serious issues, and that is the educational part of it.
Yeah, it's big. It's really, I think, AI in the workforce, but AI in education is huge, and we're just starting to tackle it. And I think we need more experts to talk to that aren't biased one way or another. They don't have because we could talk to someone that'll say it's the best thing in the whole world, but if they've got a huge financial incentive to say
That's
that,
right.
Then I'm sort of questioning, is it really? Because you really will benefit from this. And then on the other end, to say, just pencils, papers, pens, notebooks until they graduate high school. Well, that's doing it just.
That's not right either. No.
With the kids, because they have to be able to operate and function. So how soon do you start? And then the guardrails. And frankly, I'm not very, I mean, you're in Minnesota. The public school system really doesn't, I don't trust the public school system for
unfortunately.
I think there are very good teachers. I think that there are good schools, but as a whole, as an institution, the public school system is failing, and it has failed. I mean, look at our literacy rates. So I question the ability of the public school system, especially when it's controlled by teachers' unions, to adapt AI in a way that's healthy and good for students and for teachers.
I agree with that. And there's nuance in all this.
Mm-hmm.
And you need that's why Moms for Liberty are so great, because your incentives are right. And you guys, for the most part, I mean, you guys probably have some bad apples in there too. Every organization has their bad apples, but in general, your position to lead that and to really because the moms care so much about this.
It's a huge issue. A lot of moms care about it a lot. It's growing. And so we're trying to get ahead of it. And we've developed for what we know right now, we have developed school board policy and legislation that can be used. So that's my plug, to check out momsforliberty.org. And you can see that we have a whole site based on AI with links and, some explanations of what's happening and articles. And we're just starting. This is something we're just starting, but I think it's good to be ahead of an issue as big as this. So
I think it's absolutely great. Can I give my last plug before we leave?
Yes. And then I know you've got a show to do, and I'm going to do another interview with another great woman, and I'm so happy to be able to platform so many
Well, you need to give me some of these women. I want to get a little bit more
will.
women on my platform. I've talked to a lot of men, and I'm like, okay, Stacy's my publicist. And I said, God, I reach out to women a lot, and it's easier to get the men on my show, but I need to get more women. So I'm in this mode right now of trying to get more women, but
I'll send you, there's some really great women. I'll send it to Stacy.
Okay, so sarahwestall.com. Please sign up for my platforms, but also go to End Gov Coercion, Give, Send, Go, End Gov Coercion, to help me fund this lawsuit. I'd really, really appreciate it. I think the country needs it. Like I said, I've already funded everything up to, to the point of filing, and it's going to be expensive. And so we could use whatever help you possibly can give us. Nothing is going to me. It's all going to fund the efforts. And we are going to learn from this. And anything that doesn't get spent on mine rolls over to
New Richmond schools left.
So every dollar is going to be used to solve this problem for this great fight that we have to, this is one of the #1 fights that we have to preserve our freedom.
Oh, yes. And the Moms for Liberty understand what it's like to be suppressed by Google and by big tech and by the government, because we suffered from 2020 when our organization started. We were put on the FBI watch list. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, we were suppressed, actively suppressed. I was shadow banned on a regular basis and completely banned several times just for saying that you shouldn't have to wear a mask outside.
It's just so lunacy. It's totally lunacy. Total lunacy. It's crazy. Well, you guys are doing such a great job. Thank you for everything that you do. And that all of you out there that are supportive to the Moms of Liberty, and Liberty, I just thank you, all of you, for
Liberty.
being out there and doing the fight.
Yes. Go Liberty. Yes, let's have more of it. Thank you very much for coming on, and I really enjoyed this talk.
Thank you.
Bye.